Good morning. Welcome to AM Live. My name is Olive Barrows.
And I'm Dennis Okari, slightly under the weather, but woke up so well, so good, feeling energized for the day.
All right. Sorry about the. Is it a cold?
It's just a cold.
In your throat.
Just the normal homa. Taking lots of ginger.
Normal homa.
Well, hope you've woken up well this Friday. Can you believe it's Friday?
I know. Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's been a very, very long week. We're looking at a lot of activities around the country. Central focus obviously being the politics of the day and this whole issue of Iebc, which keeps coming up all the time. But thankfully, today we might end up looking at something slightly a bit different.
Yeah, we'll be looking at the legislative agenda.
And we'll have three guests in studio who will be joining us much later on to discuss this amongst other issues. But yesterday, there was a delegation that was moving from one place to another place.
Yes, and there's an image here.
Yes.
President Kenyatta yesterday held talks with visiting U.S. Senator Chris Coons, who paid him a courtesy call at State House in Nairobi. They did meet President Uhuru Kenyatta, President-elect William Ruto.
It'll take time before you get used to that. We're used to DP Ruto.
Yes, and they also met Raila Odinga, the man of the moment here. Raila versus Ruto, the case file supreme battle. The Azimio coalition is working on a broad three-pronged strategy to contest the declaration by Wafula Chebukati of William Ruto as president-elect, and in the grand scheme of things, the arguments will all come down to what the Raila team believes are inconsistencies in Iebc's vote figures, declared turnout numbers, and the undeclared skeletons in the falling out of the commission.
Well, that story is on page 2 and 3, and we'll be looking at the inside details of the dailies today. Lots of stuff going on, and Professor Sianya actually yesterday gave an impression that this could end up being the approach.
Yes, he did. I was reading it and I'm like, why do I feel like I know this already?
Well, President Uhuru Kenyatta says he is committed to a peaceful transition and handover of power to the next president, even as he lauded the peace being witnessed in the country.
The president, who yesterday emerged in public for the first time since the August 9th general election, met a congressional delegation of the U.S. Senate and House Representatives, where he pledged his commitment to entrenching democracy, in his own words, set an example in the continent and the world. Well,
the congressional delegation also met President-elect William Ruto and Azimio One Kenya presidential candidate Raila Odinga. NTV senior political affairs reporter Kennedy Moreithi with more.
With uncertainty looming over the fate of the August 9th elections and the Azimio One Kenya coalition preparing to go to court to challenge the outcome that declared William Ruto as president-elect, there seems to be international intervention. Thursday, a congressional delegation led by Senator Chris Coons, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee Subcommittee on African Affairs, met President-elect William Ruto and his main challenger Raila Odinga and their teams with a general message of maintaining peace. Apart from meeting the two, Senator Coons met President Uhuru Kenyatta at State House Nairobi, where a commitment for a peaceful transition was made. According to State House Kenya Twitter handle, President Kenyatta noted, Kenya will remain steadfast in entrenching the principles of good governance to ensure the country upholds its position of a shining example of democracy in the continent by maintaining peace during this transition period. My greatest desire is that peace will prevail and we may set an example in the continent and the world. The outcome of the just concluded elections featured prominently in the meetings, as well as a way forward for all parties. Until now, the USA has not sent a congratulatory message to President-elect William Ruto, but has only acknowledged his declaration as the winner in the election by the Iebc and hailed the country for holding peaceful elections. The US is also not referring to Ruto as president-elect. However, in a tweet on the official US Embassy Nairobi page, it is noted that the discussions between the senator and Ruto centered around U.S.-Kenya strategic partnership, promotion of peace and security in the region, and ways to strengthen US-Kenya economies. President-elect Ruto acknowledged the same on his Twitter handle. The congressional team also met Raila Odinga and his running mate Martha Karua, where both acknowledged that the question of upholding democracy was widely discussed. On the U.S. Embassy Nairobi Twitter page, it is noted their conversation focused on the U.S.-Kenya shared democratic values. On his part, Raila Odinga on his Twitter page notes, "We held candid discussions on developments around our general election and bilateral relations with the congressional delegation of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. We reiterated our commitment to pursuing legal means to resolving issues around the election results." It is not clear yet whether the congressional team came with specific demands to the political players, especially at a time President-elect William Ruto continues to receive congratulation messages from different parts of the world, Russia being the latest to do so. Kennedy Muredi, NTV.
A section of Mombasa residents yesterday moved to court seeking orders to compel the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission to carry out elections in areas where the exercise had been suspended.
Well, the residents argue that the delay in the process will deny the people a chance to elect leaders of their choice, accusing the commission of going against the commission.
Constitution, accusing the commission of going against the Constitution. Kevin Mutai also reports that Iebc Chairman Wafula Chebukati, the Ministry of Interior, and the Attorney General have been listed in the matter as respondents.
Electorate in Mombasa, while in the company of their leaders, demonstrated outside the Iebc offices in Kizingo, demanding for the polls to be conducted on 23rd of August. They expressed their disappointment over the indefinite suspension of the election in Mombasa and Kakamega counties. Other areas also affected include Rongai, Pokot South, Kacheliba, and Kitui rural constituencies, as well as Nyaki West and Kwanjenga wards in Meru and Nairobi respectively. They accused the Iebc of disenfranchising their democratic rights.
We know what you're after. Na hata mkafanya lile mnalolifanya. Kauli yangu ya mwisho mimi nawaambia wana Mombasa. Na hii ndio kauli mbiu itakayoweza kusambaa kila pahali. Wataweza kuchelewesha, lakini kuzuia hawataweza kuzuia.
A petition has now been filed before the High Court in Mombasa seeking to compel the electoral to conduct the polls on Tuesday. This move has been supported by 3 gubernatorial candidates in Mombasa who are also calling upon the commission to put its house in order. In the petition, the 3 citizens want the exercise to be conducted not later than the month of August.
Lazima kuwe na elections na kuwe na elections haraka. Na hakuna sababu yoyote. Sijaona fujo, sijaona vurugu, sijaona kwa watu hawako tayari kwa election. Hakuna sababu yoyote ya kisheria au sababu yoyote ingine kwa nini wanachelewesha hii election. Mimi naona Chebukati has gone completely rogue. It's time for Chebukati to go.
The voter volunteer to go to vote, then you deny them their rights. It means that in future, people will not take elections seriously.
It is very draining, very involving, mentally, psychologically, physically, emotionally, resource-wise. Gonna create a wave of anxiety.
They also argue that the chairman has contravened the Elections Act by suspending the elections without following the due process of the law.
I've talked to my RO and they say they are prepared. All the things that were missing, the ballot papers that were missing are there. And I have not seen if there were any issue of intimidation whatsoever in Kacheliba constituency that any Iebc official was actually threatened.
Civil society groups are also piling pressure on Chebukati to allow for the voting exercise as earlier scheduled, citing that the delay will have long-lasting impacts on the economy. They also want the government to provide adequate security resources and protect both the voters and Iebc officials.
Sisi watu wa Mombasa tumekosea wapi? Tumekuwa na miaka 10 ya uongozi wa Joho. Muda umefika tubadilishe, alafu tunapata sababu kutoka kwa Iebc kwamba hatuwezi kufanya kura.
Tunahitaji kufanya uchaguzi ili tuweze kupata viongozi katika kaunti ya Mombasa. Na tumengoja ya kutosha.
The High Court is expected to issue its ruling on the matter on Monday. Kevin Mutai, NTV in Mombasa.
Well, a lot of people complaining there, and everybody's anticipating to just figure out what's going to happen to their counties, who are going to be their next leaders, and there's the whole question of the integrity of the poll, which we were discussing yesterday. He was on the spot, and we discussed that quite at length, yeah?
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to hear from a panelist. Already we've been joined by Dr. Caroline Mose, and hi, Caroline. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see
and
you.
Advocate Steve Ogola. We're expecting Charles Kanjama to be here at the top of the hour as well. Steve, is there a deadline set in law on how soon these elections need to happen? The Mombasa gubernatorial race, the Kakamega gubernatorial race, several MP seats, ward rep seats. Is there a deadline?
The short answer is no. If you look at Section 55B of the Elections Act, permits Iebc to postpone an election in a particular electoral unit, could be the ward, the constituency, county women rep, National Assembly, even the the gubernatorial election, if circumstances so demand, and Iebc is to advise on the date when that election would be held. I find it curious that Kenyans are now raising that question. That question ought to have been raised sometimes back in 2017. You remember when the Supreme Court had ordered that fresh election be conducted, there were 27 constituencies, largely Nyanza, that did not participate in that election because of the disruption of the electoral process in that region. Occasioning, now requiring Iebc to postpone those elections. To date, those elections have never been conducted. You could argue that in terms of constitutional compliance, the people in the voters in those 27 constituencies were disenfranchised. But again, if you look at Regulation 87, Sub-Regulation 3, permits Iebc, for instance, in the context of presidential election, to call an election, declare the results, if the results in those constituencies would not alter the outcome. But specifically for the other electoral units, if the entire election has been called off or suspended, postponed, that is the right word within the meaning of Section 55B, then it's upon Iebc to determine when to conduct that election. I doubt that a judge of the High Court, properly applying his mind to the law, would direct Iebc on when to conduct the election. Because then the judge would not be equipped with the full circumstances, scenarios as to be able to know. For instance, the judge can tell the Iebc that conduct Mombasa gubernatorial election within the next 14 days because of the practical challenges. So the court would have to listen to Iebc. So whatever the Iebc would tell the judge in court, Iebc can still make that announcement in a press statement. So I think all eyes should be, or the focus should be on Iebc. Let Iebc communicate with clarity when they think the environment or the challenges that occasion the postponement can be addressed so that election can go on. But the anxiety is understandable.
But what happens in a case like Mombasa and Kakamega? Does Ali Hassan Joho remain the governor in Mombasa, for instance?
You know, there cannot be power vacuum. So there is not, unlike the presidency, which under Article 134 of the Constitution characterizes that scenario as temporary incumbency. We do not have a specific provision in the law which could permit Governor Joho or Oparanya to continue serving. But under the principle of necessity, the court would read the law in the circumstances to permit them to continue serving pending the conduct of an election. You have to rationalize. You have to ask yourself, what is the rational thing to do in the circumstances? You cannot have a county without a governor, because if the governor exits, the deputy governor would have to take over. If there is no deputy governor and the governor, of course the speaker and so on and so forth. So as it is, even if there is no clear provision can help us navigate this challenge. The purposive reading of the law generally, of course, borrowing inspiration from Article 134 of the Constitution, lends itself to one conclusion. Governor Joho, Governor Paranya will continue serving in the interim, pending the conduct of those elections.
So it's not a case of rushing the swearing-in process or the oath, taking the oath of office for these ward reps in those counties, so that they elect a speaker and then the speaker takes charge of the county. So that's not what we're looking at.
No. The constitutional pathway for the speaker to assume the office of governorship presupposes that there is a substantive office holder of the governor who has then been removed, and then the deputy governor is not capable of assuming that office. You cannot, the speaker of let's say the speaker of the county assembly of Kakamega cannot be sworn in and then he takes over the functions of the county government. He cannot. There is no legal pathway to that.
Okay. So Wycliffe Oparanya, Ali Hassan Joho remain in office? He
will remain in office until the conduct of the election.
I mean, Carol, we've been discussing the issue of Iebc and, their communication. We still have the candidates who are running for those seats, and we have residents from the story that we just watched earlier, people complaining, and there's the whole question on the integrity of the poll, that Iebc is not communicating to the candidates what the issue is, why are they again suspending it to another later date that they've not really announced. And then there's the whole question of what then happens if this is prolonged, because it's a political process. Yes. What then happens, because there are those who argue that their candidates will be favored because already the results of the presidential election have been determined, though there's going to be a case from Azimio. But at the moment, somebody can argue that that affects how people end up then going to vote.
Yes, and I think some of these concerns are very valid, because we said elections are a political process, but they're owned by everybody. We have the voters, we have the politicians themselves, we have the contenders, and we have the Iebc. My chief concern throughout this conversation has been the public perception of the Iebc. Can the voters in Mombasa County, for example, as they go to elect their governor, can the voters in Kakamega County, can the voters in Rongai constituency and the other places where the elections did not take place, can they trust the Iebc, which we now know, we've been party, we've witnessed the drama between the commissioners and all these allegations of partisanship. Can they be trusted to deliver a free, fair, and credible election for the people within these spaces, within these counties and these constituencies? I'm sure the Iebc is physically capable of doing that, but we cannot wish away the issues of integrity that have come up, the issues of the squabbling between the commissioners, and what that means for the people. Can the people trust that when they go to the polls, that their votes will not be moderated, which is the language we were hearing yesterday, and all these kinds of things that have been going on in terms of the exchanges between the two factions of the Iebc commissioners. So that is something that I think is a valid concern.
The credibility of the exercise?
Yes.
All right. So in tune with our subject today, that is the legislative agenda, as MPs elected to the National and Senate await their official gazettement by the electoral body, and that is Iebc. Lobbying for numbers in both houses has kicked off in earnest among allies of President-elect William Ruto and Azimio la Umoja One Kenya presidential candidate Raila Odinga.
Well, the looming contest rekindles the tyranny of numbers witnessed in the 11th Parliament, where President Uhuru Kenyatta's Jubilee coalition won the 2 seats. Both sides now claim they have marshaled numbers in the National Assembly to get the Speaker's slot. And TV's Martin Mwangi looks into the numbers perspective.
With the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission having declared the president-elect, the battle now shifts the control of the National Assembly and the Senate that have 349 and 67 members respectively. The National Assembly is less 4 MPs after Iebc chairman deferred polls in Rongai, Kitui Rural, Pokot South, and Kacheliba constituencies over security of staff concerns. Apart from the expected gazettement of the 337 members of the National Assembly and 47 in the Senate, depending on party strengths, Iebc will also gazette 12 nominees to the National Assembly and 20 in the Senate to represent the youth, persons with disabilities, the women, and workers. UDA shall nominate 6 members, Jubilee will nominate 1, same as Wiper Party, whereas ODM has been allowed to nominate 4. Following the gazettement of the legislators-elect, President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to convene the first sitting of the August House, where showdown looms in the election of the 2 speakers, immediately after the members' swearing-in ceremony conducted by the clerks of the respective houses. The exercise should take place on or before September 9th, 30 days after the general election.
Our figures show that we command the National Assembly, just like I said the last time.
For now, as numbers stand, Raila's Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition will get the leader of majority and majority whip in the National Assembly by virtue of their numbers until November 9th, when the Pamoja African Alliance PA and Maendeleo Chapter African liquid the coalition as per signed pre-election. Interestingly, despite the active Azimio deal, voting for Speaker's post is a secret ballot, and therefore, Ruto's Kenya Kwanza wing might lobby votes from both sides. Ruto's Kenya Kwanza has 159 MPs, while Raila's Azimio has 162 elected members from affiliate parties. Out of the total of 333 elected, Ruto's coalition has 135 single constituency elected members and 24 woman representatives, while Azimio has 142 single constituency elected members and 20 woman representatives. However, the 2 Azimio affiliate parties with 6 MPs, Alfred Mutua's Maendeleo Chapter with 2 and Amason Kingi's PA with 4, have aligned themselves with Kenya Kwanza.
Members of Parliament again? 160, 163 of them. They are here. Asanteni sana. Thank you very much. We also have in the House independents who are not members, directly members of Kenya Kwanza. Wasimame. We have them in the House. I think we have, how many of there? 8 and another 2.
As per the Kenya Kwanza agreement, Bungoma Senator Moses Wetangula will be the National Assembly Speaker candidate, while Kilifi Governor Amason Kingi goes for the Senate seat. Both will require 2/3 of the votes from both sides in round 1 and simple majority in round 2. For Azimio, former Speaker Kenneth Marende had been touted to run for the Senate Speaker, but after polls, and with Kenya Kwanza numbers in the Senate, he could contest for the National Assembly seat. In the first round of election for both speakers, the 2 houses must raise 2/3 of the members, that is, 233 members of the National Assembly and 32 members in the Senate. Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka is the latest entrant in the list of those eyeing the National Assembly seat, with Azimio leaders floating the idea as a last resort if they fail to successfully challenge Ruto's State House win at the Apex Court. In the Senate, Kenya Kwanza has a clear lead with 24 senators against Azimio's 22. As per the party's strength and party's list, UDA will have 10 nomination slots, ODM will have 6, Jubilee will have 2, whereas Wiper and Ali Robbers UDM will have 1 each. It will be another battle of numbers for the leader of majority and minority as per Article 108 of the Constitution and Standing Orders 19 of the 4th Schedule, where the party of coalition with the largest numbers takes the position. Martin Mwangi, NTV.
Well, human rights organizations based at the coast have raised concerns over the integrity of the just concluded general election.
A report by at least 4 human rights organizations done in Coast Region indicates that the electoral process was marred by irregularities. The rights groups claimed voters were issued with extra ballot papers in some polling stations in places like Kilifi North. Fatma Bugu has that report.
The human rights groups which observed the tallying and announcement of results across various polling stations in the coastal region now claim the IEBC was ill-prepared to conduct the general election.
Ballot papers sita zile wengine walikuwa wanapatiwa zaidi. Kwa mfano ya presidential unapata mtu anapatiwa 2 ama 3. Haya ni mambo ambayo tuliweza kuona katika eneo la Kilifi North.
In Tana River County, police are investigating 2 IEBC officials who were allegedly found transporting ballot box using a motorbike.
We intercepted 1 ballot box being transported with a motorbike, which was not normal. So we arrested the 2 people.
A section of candidates who vied for various seats have rejected the results, citing irregularities.
It's raising a huge tension among the public, and especially when we are hearing there's a petition in the offing because it is a gubernatorial box. I cannot trust them.
Human rights organization Huria at least 2,000 voters were irregularly transported to Kwale County to vote. Kwale is among the counties that witnessed violence during the tallying of the results.
We are raising our hands, we are coming together in solidarity to say the electoral process, the electoral process actually is in a mess.
But the whole process is a sham, and everybody should know this.
The division among the 7 IEBC commissioners has affected the credibility of the results of the August 9th elections.
Mgawanyiko ule unaonyesha wazi kwamba makomishina wenyewe IEBC ndani kuna matatizo kwa sababu wamegawanyana. Kwa hivyo ikiwa nyinyi wenyewe mmegawanyana, je, huku chini wale wengine wanaweza kufanya kazi namna gani?
The aggrieved candidates who lost in the just concluded polls have been asked to pursue legal channels to address their grievances and avoid utterances that might disrupt peace in the country.
Wale ambao wana perpetrate violence ama ghasia katika kila uchaguzi ni politicians wenyewe, wakifuatwa na vijana.
IEBC has been asked to conduct polls in Mombasa and Kakamega and 4 other constituencies where the election was postponed as soon as possible.
Kufanya makosa kama haya ya kusema kwamba ballot papers zina makosa alafu kusukuma uchaguzi mbele, hiyo ni a recipe for disaster.
Fatma Bugu, NTV, Mombasa.
Fatma Bugu pronounces that ask like an African American. The 2022 general election has seen several political giants fall by the wayside as previous top politicians who were in the political cold make a comeback. Some have endured humiliating defeat from political newbies, even as attempts by the well-known politicians who previously had huge political capital failed to materialize. Our political affairs reporter, Vincent Odor, delves deeper into the issue.
The end of the 2022 general election marked the beginning of joy to candidates who won and sorrow to those who lost. Among the top political giants who have been forced to bite the dust are KANU chairman and Baringo Senator Gideon Moi, leader of the majority in the National Assembly Amos Kimunya, Jubilee Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni, Senate Majority Leader Samuel Pogisio, and National Assembly Budget and Appropriation Committee Chairman Kanini Kega. Kimunya, Kioni and Kega were top Jubilee politicians in Mount Kenya who were pushing for Raila Odinga's presidential bid. Former industrialization CS Adan Mohamed, who was seeking to become Mandera governor, was also defeated. Former petroleum CS John Munyes was also defeated in the Turkana gubernatorial race. Senator George Haniri will be in the political cold for the first time after failing to clinch the Vihiga gubernatorial seat. A number of well-known governors who were defending their seats also failed to make it. They include Nakuru Governor Lee Kinyanjui, Francis Kimemia of Nyandarua, Kiraitu Murungi of Meru, Stanley Kiptis of Baringo, Ali Korane of Garissa, and Diritu Murithi of Laikipia, who also chaired Raila Odinga's campaign board. Meru Senator Mithika Linturi's bid for governorship also flopped. Kitui Governor Charity Ngilu did not defend her seat, while Bomet County First Governor Isaac Ruto also failed to recapture the seat. However, a number of first-term governors who were previously defeated have made a comeback. They include Julius Malombe, who has won Kitui governor's seat, Benjamin Cheboy of Baringo County, Nadhif Jama of Garissa, Professor Joshua Irungu of Laikipia, Issa Timami of Lamu, and Ahmed Abdullahi Jir of Wajir. Other top politicians who have also come back from the political cold include former Agriculture Secretary Kiunjuri, who has won Laikipia East seat, Kakamega Senator Boni Halwale, Busia Governor-elect Paul Otuoma, Dadaab MP-elect Farah Maalim, and Eldama Ravine MP-elect Musa Sirma. Other legislators who have also made a comeback are Samal Lomwa, Gashoki Gitari, Joseph Mburu, Alice Nganga of Thika Town, former Nairobi County Assembly Speaker Beatrice Elachi of Dagoretti North, Harrison Kombe, and former Security Minister Julius Sunkuli. Vincent Odur, NTV.
A momentous political realignment and shift of allegiance is playing out in the political space just days after the results of the general election were declared by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. The United Democratic Movement, led by Mandera Senator-elect Ali Roba, who had previously declared support for the Azimio la Umoja coalition, has now shifted allegiance to the Kenya Kwanza alliance. The move is expected to have an impact on the numbers in the National Assembly and Senate, with the party boasting of 8 members of parliament-elect, 2 senators-elect and 2 governors-elect. NTV's Melita Oletenges reports.
As focus shifts on who will have more numbers and control in the 13th parliament between the Azimio la Umoja coalition and the Kenya Kwanza alliance, new formations are playing out in the political space.
Governor,
The latest exodus is by the United Democratic Movement, led by Mandera Senator-elect Captain Ali Roba, who is also the outgoing Mandera governor, ditching the Azimio la Umoja coalition today, and welcomed by President-elect William Ruto, his former ally, just days after the just concluded general elections. In an interview dated 19th July 2022, Roba spoke to NTV on defending the interests of northern Kenya, bringing to the fore a debate on whether the UDM party has had a fallout with the Azimio la Umoja coalition.
Nobody can take us for granted. We are here, and we are here for very, very serious reason. If we don't get our stakes, that's not the end of the world. The beginning of a new journey in terms of what is going to happen in the relationship between Azimio constituent parties.
The UDM party decomes with 8 members of parliament elect in the just concluded elections, including Laisami's Member of Parliament Joseph Lekuton, who makes a political comeback to parliament. 2 governors-elect Mohamed Adan Khalif of Mandera County and Mohamud Ali of Marsabit County. Senators-elect under the UDM party are Abbas Sheikh Mohammed and Captain Ali Roba, both newcomers in the Senate. Roba emerging as a kingpin of the northern Kenya region.
We must have relevance. We must have identity. We must be able to position ourselves strategically to be able to fit into the fabric of Kenyan public and be able to sit and negotiate on behalf of the population that we have. Ultimately, you know, everybody will have to fight for national space.
Despite jumping ship, the UDM party remains legally under the Azimio la Umoja coalition after an agreement deposited to the registrar of political parties. Other parties who shifted allegiance but still legally bound under the Azimio la Umoja coalition include Maendeleo Chapter Party, led by Alfred Mutua, and the Pamoja Africa Alliance Party. The agreement states that the parties could leave 6 months prior to the election or 3 months after the election. Melita Oletenges, NTV.
Women leaders in different sectors have lauded Kenyan voters for voting in women leaders in different positions in the just concluded election. Maendeleo Wanawake organization has celebrated the increase in the number of elected women leaders, saying it is a significant step towards gender parity in the country. They, however, called on the elected women leaders to deliver to the electorate. Naoma Sampo has that story.
The 2022 general election has been touted as a significant election for the country, and especially for women eyeing leadership as the country strives to achieve equity in representation of both genders. And although the battle to achieve equal representation is still far from over, women leaders in the country say at least the steps made gives them hope. In the just concluded election, 7 women governors were elected, up from 3 in the previous election, while 29 members of National Assembly secured their slots in the August House, up from 20 in the previous election.
It is indeed a significant step towards the Kenyan women participation in the 2 houses.
Thank you, Kenyans, for recognizing many women and entrusting them with leadership. In the last government, we had only 6% representation in the Council of Governors. This year, we moved up to 14% so far. In the Senate, we had 6% representation, and this year we have maintained the 6%. In the National Assembly, we had 8% representation, and this year we moved up to 10%.
Out of the 7 elected governors, 4 have been elected on a UDA ticket, 1 on an ODM ticket, 1 on Wiper, and 1 as independent. In the Senate, the number of elected women has dropped from 4 to 3. Out of the 3, 1 has been elected on a UDA ticket, 1 Wiper, and 1 Jubilee. Maendeleo ya Wanawake organization has hailed the steps made, saying this was achieved through rigorous campaigns. They are also celebrating that a woman was given the deputy role in one of the leading coalitions, saying the move is a signal of greater things to come. However, women leaders believe a lot more needs to be done.
That's a really big milestone for the women of this country. It shows that Kenyans are slowly accepting women leadership. I'm not sure we can as yet celebrate too much, because I think when we hit about 20 women, then for sure we can say we've really made it.
The leaders have also lauded President Uhuru Kenyatta for overseeing a peaceful general election and called on Kenyans to continue observing peace and not allow the politicians to divide them. Naoma Sampao, NTV.
All right, we need to take a break, Dennis, but when we come back, I'm curious to hear from our panelists this morning. The questions of the 2/3 gender rule, as we refer to it colloquially. Is that hasn't quite been met yet. With the previous parliament, the 12th parliament, Maraga in 2020 recommended its dissolution. So what happens with this parliament moving forward? We take a break. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Dennis, do you know that song?
Yes. Mason Betha. Okay. We were of that era, the 90s.
Before we get into parliamentary matters and 2/3 gender rule, you mentioned Article 55B of the Elections Act, Steve. And we had this conversation yesterday with Professor Bensi Hanya. You also pointed us in this direction as far as the postponement and the basis of the postponement of the election in those 2 counties, a gubernatorial race, various MP seats and ward rep seats. And a reading of 55B says that the commission may, where a date has been appointed for holding an election, postpone the election in a constituency, county or ward for such period as it may consider necessary where A, there is reason to believe that a serious breach of peace is likely to occur, B, it is impossible to conduct the elections as a result of a natural disaster. And C, that there has been an occurrence of an electoral malpractice of such a nature and gravity as to make it impossible for an election to proceed. Now, where an election is postponed under subsection 1, the election shall be held at the earliest practicable time. Notwithstanding, this is now, I think, what you referenced, the provisions of this section, the Commission may, if satisfied that the result of the elections will not be affected by voting in the area in respect of which substituted dates have been appointed, direct that a return of the elections be made. Was IEBC required to meet this threshold? That is, either there's a serious breach of the peace, a natural disaster, or there has been electoral malpractice?
I think, Olive, the interpretive pathway to Section 55B would depend on your legal philosophy, for instance. If you are a textualist, you will adopt what lawyers call a mechanistic and legalistic interpretation, which means you limit yourself to what has been circumscribed as circumstances under which an election may be postponed within the scope of Section 55B. If you are a teleologist, you'll adopt what lawyers call a purposive and holistic interpretive approach, which means you go deep and ask yourself, are there circumstances that may not be listed under Section 55B, but which may be considered to fall within that rubric? The short answer is yes. The Constitution itself ordains an approach that requires the purposive interpretive matrix to the Constitution, and of course all the laws that fall under it. If you look at Section 55B, it permits IEBC to postpone elections if circumstances so demand. The section has attempted, although not drafted in elegant terms, it has attempted to list some of those circumstances, say that situations such as what we find ourselves in Kakamega and Vihiga fall within the rubric of Section 55B. The short answer is yes. We cannot conduct election when the images of candidates and their names don't match. Olive, what provision of law would then permit IEBC to postpone those elections? The provision of the law that permits postponement is Section 55. I think in terms of what lawyers would call under the principle of necessity, even if you are to read Section 55 narrowly, which I have rejected, under the principle of necessity, Section 55B would still be called upon to permit the postponement of that election. And the right thing to do is for IEBC to advise the country when they think, because that provision permits them the discretion, when they think the ballot papers that were mixed up would be reprinted and then the election to go on. Initially, they had suggested that the election would be conducted on 25th or 28th. 25th, I think, of this month. But then they extended that timeline because of the commotion that happened at the commission and the disruption of the tallying process, which left key election officials traumatized. So they would have to issue new communication. But I think the Constitution also requires IEBC and all constitutional office holders to exercise their discretion judiciously, which means IEBC does not have the liberty to say we will conduct this election in Kakamega and Vihiga, Kakamega and Mombasa when we want. It must give practical timelines. What is the reasonable time? If it's not this month of August, it can't go beyond September. So I think the election will be conducted within the next 60 days.
I mean, Wakili, on that point that Olive is raising, the postponement of the election by the Commission, yes. You have said that they also need to give practical timelines.
Yes.
But still, they are under their own discretion to say we will do it within 1 month or within 2 months. Do you think this opens a door, because this is a political process, does it then open a door for other issues that will arise later? Because if we don't have timelines within the Constitution, we have timelines for everything else. But how is it then this one is missing? So in the event, anticipating an event such as the one we find ourselves in, where we have Kakamega and Mombasa postponing, should there have been a provision then for a timeline under which IEBC should then conduct those elections instead of, giving different dates and just leaving it open?
And if I can piggyback on what Dennis is asking. you see likely in 60 days. One, what informs that estimation? And two, is there precedence for what we are witnessing now, where the commission is divided?
Well, I can tell you that the longest time IEBC can take to conduct the election in Kakamega and Mombasa would not be more than 90 days. Why? They should conduct those elections within 90 days because ordinarily that is the time frame for conducting by-elections. If you look at them, if you're looking for tools to assist in interpreting, you know, if you're looking for a rational explanation, how long IEBC can take before they conduct the election. Can they take 1 year? No. Can they take, unless circumstances so demand are so grave, yeah? I don't think circumstances that we have now, if you're talking about election officials being depressed, I think they should be able to come out of it quickly and be able to conduct the election. The Constitution, if you look at the timelines that the Constitution has provided, under Article 140 of the Constitution, a fresh election is to be conducted within 60 days. Fresh presidential election in the entire country within 60 days. If there was a runoff, it's supposed to be conducted within 30 days. So you have 30 days for a runoff, 60 days for fresh election, 90 days for by-election. So IEBC would have to work extra hard to extend that time frame beyond 90 days. So that's why I said they have the discretion to determine when to conduct the election, but that discretion must also be exercised judiciously. Now, this is not like the 2017 fresh election, where some 27 constituencies were election was postponed and they were never conducted. Ideally, IEBC ought to have conducted the election in those 27 constituencies so that you don't disenfranchise. But if you look at the proviso under section 55B and then regulation 87.3 of the election general regulations 2012, IEBC was permitted to call that election if the result in the 27 constituencies would not make a difference. Maybe they debated in their office and they decided, we have already called this election. What is, yes, some people have been disenfranchised, but what is the legal and practical sense benefits for conducting election? Is it just to tick a box that these 27 constituencies also voted when that result will not alter the outcome of that election? The outcome has already been determined, the fate is sealed, a president is serving. That context is different. The context we find ourselves in is that you have constituencies and counties that don't know the fate of their leaders. So therefore, election must be conducted. I believe that election will be conducted at the farthest 90 days. That is a rational explanation. I would be extremely shocked and worried if the commission said they would conduct this election in the postponed areas probably in a period that is beyond 90 days. There would need to be a compelling reason. So if somebody has moved to court to seek to compel the commission, like I said earlier, whatever IEBC is going to say in response to those cases in court, it can actually communicate through a press conference. So what I would urge the commission to do, in order to manage public expectation and lower anxiety, it needs to communicate the new dates so that candidates begin to prepare, so that there's closure in this election.
And speaking of new dates, this is a question to you, Akili, and I have another one for Carol, but I'll start with you, Akili. So they have the discretion to give, the dates. But so far, the Mombasa gubernatorial race, for example, one candidate has said that he's going to sue IEBC because what IEBC has done has violated the rights of the voters by, this postponement. Are there grounds for suing IEBC by either candidates, whether it's Kakamega or Mombasa or any of the other areas where we have a postponement? So that's my question to you. And to you, Carol, the presidential results, there are those who argue that they will most likely influence the Kakamega and the Mombasa governor races, and already we are seeing realignments. We are seeing, independent candidates and other parties now joining the Kenya Kwanza alliance. So that shifts perception. So the outcome of the presidential race, do you think this again will largely influence how people end up voting in the in the elections that have been suspended. But I'll start with you, Wakili, on the issue of suing IEBC.
To be honest, Mr. Okari, there are no genuine and legitimate grounds at this moment for suing the Commission for postponing the election. Because had the Commission proceeded with the election, with those kind of mix-ups in the ballot papers, the integrity of that election would have been cast in doubt, and the High Court would have had no hesitation in nullifying or invalidating the results and triggering a fresh election, a by-election in those areas, yeah? So at this time, if you know, we say, if you go to court, you can go to court even for humor or self-amusement. No one can stop you from accessing the court. But do you genuinely believe that you have a rational ground?
Well, but Nasir says,
Yes.
Nasir argues and says that the Constitution is very clear. It states that the county governor shall be elected on the second Tuesday of August every 5 years. That's the first ground for him.
I don't think that ground has been framed by a lawyer, because the law is not supposed to be read in isolation in that manner. You're supposed to read the electoral laws holistically together so that you harmonize those different provisions. Yes, the framework is election every second Tuesday, every 5th year. But if circumstances demand that makes it impossible to conduct those elections, Section 55 kicks in. It then says you postpone. The issue, and I say this with finality, because I think part of our role is to sensitize even those people who want to go to court. And I'm advising them. Time is not ripe to rush to court to sue the Commission for postponing election. Unless you just want to litigate for collateral purposes, like just for the sake of it, for humor, for self-amusement, and also for the nuisance value. Although these are things that are collateral to the real intention, to the genuine intention why someone will go to court. Wait, I would rather someone frames a petition and takes it to court, say, listen, IEBC postponed the election in Kakamega and Mombasa and some other constituencies, but they have not yet indicated when they intend to conduct those elections. So the delay or the inordinate delay or the failure to communicate causes anxiety and is unacceptable in a situation we find ourselves in. So what the court would then require IEBC to do, IEBC to express itself or to pronounce itself when it will conduct these elections. If, for instance, the Commission says, and I've already answered that, we will conduct this election in 1 year's time, I think someone can question that for rationality. What is the rationale for postponing the election for 1 year? If it says 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, I think that is within the already existing legal infrastructure for conducting elections.
Okay. I mean, Carol,
Yes.
the influence of the presidential outcome to these elections that have been suspended.
That influence cannot be dispelled. I mean, we must assume at some point that it will. If I was to bet on a horse and, I was to bet after the race has started, I would probably bet on the horse that's ahead. I mean, we all want to win. So in that sense, there is a possibility that that could happen. Especially in an environment where we are seeing a lot of crossovers. We don't want to call them defections, crossovers, because, the language now is that everybody wants to be on the winning team. So would the presidential results, influence those that are in progress? They could. We have to consider the possibility that they could. But the beauty of voters is that I think they've become more nuanced, they've become more complex. And when an election is called, there would be a period of campaigns, because the IEBC will not call for an election next week and say we are all going next week. So that period of campaign, we can also not dispel that we never know what happens. We never know what kind of rhetoric or what kind of narratives would arise within that process. And at the end of the days the voters will choose according to what they want to choose. Will they choose according to what they? That's a possibility. But again, we are at different levels in terms of having a governor from whichever side of the political divide. We also have to realize that we now live in an era of devolution, where the central government does not necessarily decide to channel money this way or that way. Of course, there is that power, but at the end of the day, we live in a devolved, era. So the voter will choose according to how they are compelled to choose, either through the campaign period or even through the presidential results. We have no way of predicting that. What we will do is just we will let the voter decide, because at the end of the day, it is the voter who will decide who they want to go with. Even looking at the previous, like in Meru, for example, we had the entire, UDA, and yeah, it was a UDA wave. But the voters in Meru, in their own wisdom, even with the entire region having been yellow, even right down from the MCA level, in their own wisdom decided to choose an independent governor. So at the end of the day, I want to believe that voters have become more complex, they've become more nuanced, they will decide at the ballot box who to vote for.
Well, Carol, they will decide, but
yes.
There are those who say that in this country, I mean, if you look at the past elections, the president has immense power and influence, and the two camps are arguing, and the candidates are arguing that, the presidency obviously has an impact of the races, given that, the messaging that is crafted around the campaign after we're done with this election anyway, is, to dangle the carrot of, you are better placed when you're on the winning side, not on the opposition side.
Yes.
So dangling that, that messaging around, you are better placed if you are with us who are in government now, the seat of power, than if you're in the opposition. And we're already saying the alignments. You don't think that will have any effect?
I do think it will have an effect, but I also don't want us to sit here and infantilize voters and say, these voters, they'll be influenced and they'll vote. Let the voter decide. Like I've said, voters have become very complex these days. We've seen this even in this campaign period, where they was very close. So we shouldn't sit infantilize voters and say, this carrot, a carrot may be dangled and they might decide to go for it or not. So we cannot do that. I think we leave this to the voter. The voter will decide, and there will be a campaign period, which I think is fair to any side. The candidates will throw themselves back in the field and tell the voters, they will craft their own messages to the voter. And at the end of the day, the voter will decide whether these things influence or not. Is a conversation that's valid, but the voter will decide. It's up to the voters.
All right, and Steve, the basis of my question on MCAs and speaker was off of this. This is a medical doctor and not a lawyer, Dr. Buni Halwale, but he has been a legislator and has been elected again. And he said suspension of Kakamega and Mombasa gubernatorial elections has serious constitutional implications. Oparanya and Joho are no longer governors. MCAs must be sworn in immediately and thereafter elect their speakers. The speakers must then immediately assume office as acting governors. You told us this is erroneous reasoning from a legal standpoint, and Steve has taught us a few philosophies, Dennis. Yesterday we learned about plain reading of the text of the law. We learned about the golden rule and structure and the mischief rule. Today Steve has taught us what are the philosophies?
Textualist.
Textualist?
A textualist or a teleologist.
Teleologist.
A textualist has a mechanistic and legalistic approach to reading of the law. He says, look at the text. What does it say? I stop there.
Yes.
Let the text speak for itself. A teleologist has a purposive reading of the law. What is he invokes the spirit of the law. What does the law intend to achieve?
The context.
Can this context fit within the rubric of this law? The short answer is, and I think the High Court particularly has discouraged that textualist approach to reading of the law and has encouraged a more holistic, purposive, teleological reading of the law. I think I understand where Boni Halwale is coming from, because you see, there are political and legal reasons that underpin his tweet. Yeah? The political reasons is that the influence of Governor Paranyas in this election cannot be underrated. And if he continues to hang on onto power, he's likely to deepen that influence to the benefit of the of Boni Halwale, or maybe UFIT is candidate, yeah, to the benefit of UDA's candidate, and of course at the expense of UDA's candidate, I think is Senator Malala.
Yes, Clifford Malala.
Who is now running.
Yes.
The legal approach is that argument that MCAs should elect the speaker, then the speaker can then hold forth pending the election, is not an argument that can be dismissed outright. It's a cogent argument, it's the alternative argument, but if you look at that argument, the context, it's not wishful thinking. So we have to appreciate that whoever has advised him to think that, because that thought may have been influenced by an advocate, for instance, is also well within his rights to take that interpretive pathway. It's a possible interpretive pathway to resolving the crisis we have there. But then you have to ask yourself, what are the circumstances when the speaker may assume the office of the governor as clearly spelled in the Constitution? You have to ask yourself, can you then expand those circumstances to cover this? What is the fate of the governor who has not handed over power? So if you look at Article 134 of the Constitution on temporary incumbency, and you look at the fact that continuity in the county, continuity in terms of service delivery in the county must go on, then you have a governor who has not handed over power. His term has ended. Governor Paranya, Governor Joho, in law their term have ended, and if they continue to make executive decisions, they make executive decision pending the appointment or the election of a substantive office holder. The decisions they make from the 9th, because the law says people in the executive wing of the political leadership, the governors and the presidency, their term, they continue holding office from the date of that election, from the date of the election until the swearing in of the next executive officer, be they the president or the governor. They continue holding that office under what you may consider in the language of Article 134 as temporary incumbency, to protect the legitimacy of the decisions that Governor Paranya may make before a new governor is sworn in. If he needs to make decisions, he'll be making decisions as a governor in transition, holding forth pending to hand over. I think if the principle is that he holds over until a new governor is elected, the argument that until that election is conducted, he will hold over, I think is also a plausible argument. Now, this is one matter that I genuinely would be happy to have the High Court invited to pronounce itself on. Because then now we have learned that circumstances can arise which were not anticipated in the Constitution. Some are clear-cut, like the postponement of election, that one is clear-cut. The circumstances that we have that led to postponement does not need robust interpretive approach as to be able to have another reading other than what is in Section 55B. The question of whether Governor Joho and Oparanya can continue holding forth pending the outcome of the election, or whether the speakers of the respective assemblies can then assume that mandate, it's an important constitutional question that, if taken to the High Court would have to reflect carefully and read the law in a manner that covers the present scenario and also the future scenarios.
Okay.
Do they continue enjoying their salaries, assuming that we'll have an election in, let's say, 60 days or the 90, which probably will be the maximum?
They will, definitely, they will. You see, and I think for me, why I'm persuaded to think that Governor Joe may continue. You see, if you read in this particular context only, in the next election, you'll have another context obtaining. You could have election in the entire county postponed. It falls within Section 55B. If you have election in the entire county postponed, all elected positions, all the 5 positions in the county, governor, senator, women rep, MCA, CA, all those elections, if they are postponed, there will be no speaker, there will be no assembly to be sworn in, there will be no speaker to take over. That then would then lend itself to the argument that it then makes practical and legal sense to have an incumbent governor that is already in office to continue extending his mandate in the same manner that Article 134 permits the president to extend his mandate. These are questions that we'd be happy to converse at the High Court if the court was invited to.
You earlier said that the risk of having this, we have this situation, is that you would have the current governor having influence that will give an advantage to a candidate that they prefer over the candidate that their preferred candidate is running up against. What level of influence is this, you think?
You know, just like the power of incumbency, and Dr. got it well, you cannot underscore, for instance, at the national level, the influence of the office of the president in the outcome of any election. Because the illusion of inclusion in government can make voters vote for a candidate otherwise would not have voted for, except for the reason that he's now the candidate of a party that has now produced the president. I can tell you, Senator Malala's chances in Kakamega have shot up. Because you now have the president-elect coming from UDA and is running on a UDA ticket. That is likely to flip some votes in his favor. In Mombasa, the outgoing governor, Joho, and in Kakamega, the outgoing governor, Oparanya, their own influence within that, because you have the governor state, you know, this is the outgoing governor. They could use that office subtly to extend political dividends to the candidates running under their party. So we can't entirely overrule it.
Okay, and this is, I have Article 134 of the Constitution open. This is what you're referring to. So this refers to the exercise of presidential powers during temporary incumbency. A person who holds the office of president or who is authorized in terms of this Constitution to exercise the powers of the president during the period commencing on the date of the first vote in a presidential election and ending when the newly elected president assumes office. So you're taking a purposive view of this article of the Constitution to extend to the office of governor. I'd like us now to look at the Daily Nation. Are we fine with this? You are going to interact with this article before I change. Okay. Daily Nation, and here we have the man of the moment, Raila Odinga, Chebukati. So they say, according to the Daily Nation, today's Daily Nation front page, Azimio will employ a three-pronged strategy. One, turnout. Chebukati initially reported a 65.4% turnout, which translates to 14,466,779 voters, but his final tally was 140,028 votes less at 14,326,751 minus those who voted manually. Voting patterns. Azimio will seek to know how hundreds of thousands of people voted for president only without a corresponding number of spoiled ballots for lower seats. And three, split commission. Could the Cherera faction of the divided electoral commission have more secrets in the bag, and would they be willing to reveal them? Carol.
Yes.
As Dennis mentioned, I feel like I had a Mwakenya because we discussed this with Professor Ben Sihanya yesterday, and he said this time Raila Odinga has an easier case to make than was the case in 2017. Does this come as a surprise to you, this three-prong strategy?
No. It doesn't. And I remember asking, what is the Azimio case? I'm a big fan of, if you are disgruntled and you have a case, go to the court. You know, that is a legal pathway. There's precedent. But I was curious to know what is the, and you know, I mean, do they have a case and what is it based on? So that at the end of the day, Kenyans also don't feel that people are just running to the courts, as Wakili has rightfully put, for the nuisance level. What are we going to do there? Are we just going there for the sake of going there? So when I see these three, the first one for me goes back to what we've been saying here, mathematics and how numbers are political. Because all these numbers, what do they mean? When you look at point number one, a 65.4% turnout, which translates to 14.466779 million voters. But then the final tally is at 140,028 votes less. What does that mean? What does that mean? Does it mean that these votes less were votes that belonged to one side of the political divide? What does that mean? So at the end of the day, these points will probably be deeply, you know, there'll be a deeper, you know, exegesis of what this means. For me, the second point is the one that actually would take me back to 2017, when the justices of the Supreme Court were asking the lawyers, if you're given 6 ballots and you enter, the polling booth and you only vote for one person, let's say the president, where do the other 5 ballots go? Are they stray ballots? Where are they? And I remember that became a huge contention. So for me seeing this, it takes me back to 2017, and I can see how that can become a talking point, a point of contention at the Supreme Court, because we've been here before. And I remember when these questions were not answered well, a lot of questions were opened up. So does it mean that somebody somewhere massaged numbers to boost the presidential votes upwards? Because these are the lower levels. Once you're given 6 ballots, where do the other 5 go? Split commission, for me, I would want to hear what the Supreme Court will pronounce itself in that. Like I said, we've not seen this since 2010 with the advent of the new constitution. This is new ground, I think, and it will be interesting for me to see how the commission, the Supreme Court can pronounce itself, because, again, in the long view, I like to think of the long view. What happens when Dennis Okari wants to run as governor of County X, and then we have a commission that is split? We have a commission where this, one faction appears to be on the opposing side and one faction appears to be on this side. So for me, that is something I would love to hear what the Supreme Court will say with regards to point number 3, which is the split commission. Remember, at the end of the day, while these are, this is in the area or the realm of legalese, we are all invested in this process because at the end of the day, like we've been saying here all week, these things are political, and because everything is political, we are all invested. Even we who read the law from a very textual, or from a novice point of view, but we would love to know. I would personally love to know what the Supreme Court would say once these points are before the court itself.
Okay.
Yes.
Steve, who is Iebc? When we head into the Supreme Court, Iebc has previously come as one party, a respondent in these presidential petitions. In this case, who is Iebc when 4 commissioners and the chairman are reading from different books?
Well, to answer that question, I wanted to comment on what you said, but let me begin by responding to your question. The Constitution does not anticipate a situation where the commissioners publicly disagree and even sabotage their own functions. So I think if a scenario like that happens, the spotlight should shift not on Chebukati and the other 2 commissioners, Professor Gulia and Moluboya, but on the other 4. Again, I don't know what to say this. Let me sensitize Kenyans in this manner. Law is not as complex as we make it be. You have to ask yourself, what is the rational thing to do in the circumstances, Dennis? You are a commissioner sworn in to protect and defend the Constitution and to execute the mandate of that office. Okay, even with all the charitable assumptions that can come with it, that you have genuine, legitimate and deserving grievances around the tallying of the so-called opaqueness, do you genuinely believe as a commissioner, no less than the vice chairperson of the commission, that the rational reaction, Dennis, is to call a press conference right in the middle of declaration of results, the final results, when Kenyans have been waiting anxiously, that the rational thing to do, to document your grievances, dissatisfaction with the process, based on your own perception, that the rational thing to do is to sabotage the final declaration. I ask myself, you want to challenge the outcome of this election, but you don't want the result to be declared. I mean, it's just a irreconcilable position, because you cannot challenge what has not been declared. At least favor the commission with an opportunity to declare the results. So the disruptions at Bomas is highly regrettable and embarrassing, but also self-defeating in the sense that you ought to permit it, because you cannot approach the Supreme Court with a presidential election petition unless results have been declared. But you are in plenary trying to disrupt the process leading to declaration. But at the same time, you want to approach the Supreme Court. It's oxymoronic. But also as commissioners, you have, for now, for purposes of this, for purpose of completeness of the conversation, and since they are not here to defend themselves, let us give them the charitable assumption that their grievances are genuine and deserving of attention. Exactly. We are questioning, and I am questioning the discretion and the manner in which they exercise that discretion, because there are other halfway measures. You could permit the chairman to announce the results, then in your boardroom meeting say, okay, in our view, these results ought not to have been announced until we cross-check them or verify them as commissioners. That is our humble reading of the law. But you went ahead and declared them. If there should be a problem, I think we want to put it in writing that we do not own those results, so that we protect our integrity as commissioners who will remain here longer. You understand? That's a rational reaction. But when you have a sensational reaction, and I think part of the problem that we have in this country, which I found very curious, that there is a disturbing pattern of constitutional hysteria. Everybody says the Constitution is being violated. Yeah. And it sounds almost fashionable to just emerge from the periphery, force yourself to the center and say, I'm defending the Constitution. I think that's a chaotic reading of the law that charges rather than advances of the Constitution. That was pontification. Now let us narrow down on the real issues. We cannot delegitimize the Right Honorable former Prime Minister's contention with the electoral process or any other person's contention with the electoral process, because the Supreme Court has said three things. In terms of election management, IEBC must demonstrate competence every step of the way. It must demonstrate compliance with the law every step of the way. And thirdly, it must demonstrate openness every step of the way. In my own assessment, as an observer of this process and as an election law practitioner, in my view, IEBC ticked all the boxes. Why? As soon as they received the polling station results in Form 34A, they made them available on the public portal. And we are progressing very well. Dennis, no one questioned the integrity of the results in Form 34As. Problem began at the tallying. Remember, we had this Form 34As being uploaded as they were being received right from Tuesday night all through to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we were being entertained by the choir, and Kenyans were celebrating the commission for being transparent. Yes. And they said this time round the commission has managed public expectations so well. Until Saturday and Sunday, then now Monday, the lead up to the final declaration, when the political leaders sensed that the results may go one way or another, then problem began at the tallying center. You know, if I look at the judgment in Mainakiai, and I say this with tremendous respect on those who are working on the petition, they need to also understand this concern and cover it. If you look at the jurisprudence in Mainakiai, which has been adopted and reiterated by the Supreme Court, the judgment in Mainakiai says that the polling station, Olive, is the locus, that is the right word, that's the word they have used, the locus for expression of the will of the people. Yeah. The results in the polling station are final, may not be altered by anyone, let alone a commission sitting in Nairobi. So the commission by law are not required to own the results. You can't own them. The people who are required to own the result is the presiding officer in the polling station, because he's the one that is making the final declaration, he's the one who will hold accountable, and then the returning officer at the constituency. Because election for president is held in the constituency by law, not at the commission at Bomas. So I think if you take that reading of the law, it would mean that if you want to audit the process, which is allowed, anyone is allowed to audit it, and the right forum for auditing how election was managed, including some of the questions you raised, is the Supreme Court. So we can't fault someone who seeks to audit how the election was managed. In fact, we ought to celebrate that. Yes. But once you arrive at that arena for auditing, you must at least demonstrate the Supreme Court that election as conducted in the polling station was fraught with fraud and falsification, and the Form 34As are not a true reflection of the will of the voters, and you must particularize. Out of these 46,229 polling stations, which polling stations, Olive? Don't give us sweeping figures. 300,000 in favor of the president. No, 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 no. Break it down so that we can work together. Which polling stations are contentious?
Well, Wakili, you talked about the openness. Sorry, you talked about the openness of, you know, the uploading of the testicle.
I don't know what the question is. I don't know what the question is, Dennis.
I'm under the weather, and this cold.
Maybe what I can just say is to
what I'm trying to raise is the issue of Azimio building a case to demonstrate inconsistencies in the figures. So the attempt to discredit the figures is being waged on two fronts. So you have questions about the actual voter turnout and reported higher presidential tallies for their main opponent in certain Kenya Kwanza strongholds compared to votes garnered by candidates in other elective seats. So that those who then argue that, yes, the forms are being uploaded, but all we're getting are forms. Are they authentic forms? Are they fake forms? Or was the Iebc portal or the system hacked and somebody uploaded, you know, fake forms 34As and so on and so forth?
Dennis, what is the law on result management? You know, we cannot pontificate broadly and make sweeping statements without making reference to the law on result management. The law on result management is three-pronged. On declaration of those, after the final tabulation of the results at the polling station, agents must sign those results and then be given a copy. So I want to know. It's not enough to say, were these fake forms? Were agents in the polling stations, because the law permits you to have an agent? Did you sign that form? Were you given a copy of that result as an agent? Number two, those results in Form 34A are supposed to be pasted at the polling station. Are you alleging that some polling stations, the result was not publicly displayed? Those results are supposed to be transmitted electronically to the public portal at the National Tallying Center for ease of access nationwide. So even if you say that Form 34A in the portal may have been fake or interfered with, what about the physical copy that you have? What about the one that was pasted? You know, these are questions that anyone framing a petition must reflect on, because they could answer some of the concerns you have. You must make sure that you say, this is my grievance with this election. And you must particularize that grievance. What I've said is this: as an advocate who is in practice, it cannot be fair to sit on national television like this and then just, you know, undermine the integrity of of a petition that is pending determination. But for purposes of public communication, just to sensitize our viewers, what we want is this: we want that in the first instance, we trust that IEBC has done a good job. And in the second instance, if somebody disputes that IEBC has done a good job, to take that matter in court. People like yesterday, the UDA supporters should not discredit or delegitimize Azimio's concerns, because the Constitution, Article 140 itself, anticipates that if you are unhappy with the results, you progress the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court judges have prepared for this. They have trained themselves, they have familiarized themselves with the laws, the setting is ready. They're just waiting for the petition to arrive so that we can audit the process and manage it. What I disagree with is this: if you want to favor the public with your concerns around election management, at least favor them with an explanation that they can sit back and reflect on and find that this makes rational sense. I've said, if you tell me there was voter inflation in the extent of, let's say, 300,000 in some regions where the rival had huge support, it's okay to say that, but can you also go further and tell us voter inflation can only happen in polling stations? Which polling stations? And for me, as an observer, I've already clarified, I never sensed any problem, and the whole country did not sense any problem with the results that were going on. Form 34A were being uploaded, people were downloading them. I accessed the IEBC portal. I saw all those Form 34As, I sampled a few, but you know, sitting in my office assessing the portals, I'm not better. The person who is better placed is the candidate. because the candidate had the agents. So I would have loved to see a statement that out of the 46,229 polling stations, our agents in 10,000 polling stations were kicked out. So the voting was opaque. So we can't own from 34As in those 10,000 polling stations. To date, I think I've not been favored with that kind of communication. What I've been favored with is that in the region where our opponent was, his votes were inflated. You know, the problem with that, Dennis, is this. You plant doubt in the mind of supporters, because supporters, they are supporters because they believe in you, and they want you to become the president. And given another chance at the ballot, they would vote for you. So when you say his votes were inflated so that he can emerge the winner, you make the voter, who is your supporter, suspicious of the commission. You know, Dennis, you may be a good man, but you see also good perception is everything. If I say you're a bad man, then it does not even matter that you're a good man. I just have to say Dennis is a bad man, and that's final, and the people I'm telling that Dennis is a bad man will say, okay, Steve Ogolla says Dennis is a bad man, but I don't need to go further.
Okay, Steve, but hasn't the commission invited said suspicion, given claims of what was it? What was the word? What was the word? Moderation of results, and the other side alleging that the process towards the end was opaque. We take a break, but we've been joined by Advocate Charles Kanjama. Karibu sana. I'm curious to hear what his view is of this reported three-pronged strategy Azimio intends to employ in the Supreme Court. And think about this, Wakili. Who is IEBC when they go to the Supreme Court as a party, as a respondent? Who will be IEBC? Will it be Wafula Chebukati, the chairman, or the 4 dissenting commissioners? See you on the other side of this break. All right, we continue on AM Live, and before we took the break, we were interrogating Azimio's three-pronged strategy at the Supreme Court as reported by the Daily Nation on speaking to quote-unquote insiders. Before we took the break, I asked Charles Kanjama, who is IEBC in this instance?
IEBC is first of all the commissioners. There is no doubt about it. The constitutional architecture is clear. The commissioners under the chairmanship of Chebukati make up the IEBC. Secondly, IEBC is the secretariat together with the commissioners, because the commissioners appoint the secretariat, which includes the CEO and all the staff of the commission. And very importantly, among the staff of the commission are the returning officers who are recognized under Article 86 of the Constitution as the people who collate and declare the results. So that constitutes IEBC.
But this is a situation where it's a divided commission, where this is a presidential petition. And 4 of the IEBC commissioners have disassociated themselves with the presidential election results as declared by Wafula Chebukati.
I think if I was a judge of the Supreme Court, I would want to hear from both factions, allow me to call them that, of the commissioners. The results that are being challenged are the results declared by Chebukati. So I'd want Chebukati to be represented and his faction of the commission represented, because he was representing IEBC when he declared the results. And I would expect there to be lawyers who represent that declared result on behalf of IEBC. But I'd also want to hear from these other commissioners. In fact, if I was a judge of the Supreme Court, I would be very willing to summon them or to ask them to have a lawyer to represent them and come and to explain what was their concern and has it been addressed. Of course, there are logistical challenges, because typically it is the job of the commission, as commission, to appoint lawyers to represent the commission in court matters. And ordinarily, you'd assume that the commission is united. And there is an opportunity between today and the day when they appoint lawyers for them to reunite because there are several days coming up. They have opportunities to meet and engage. And if they do so, there'll be no controversy. But if they are still disunited, then my expectation would be that the results are defended by a lawyer representing IEBC, appointed by the chair, and the team that is not satisfied with those results, led by the vice chair, also gets a lawyer to come to court and to explain their concerns, so that the Supreme Court can get the benefit of both positions and arguments and all the facts in the case. Because the job of the Supreme Court judge is really to hear all the facts and then to make a determination.
I think we have a caller at this point before we continue the conversation. We have Joshua from Kisumu. Joshua, if you can hear me, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
Just lower the volume of your TV so that we can hear you clearly, Joshua.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
Okay, go ahead, Joshua.
Yeah, I have like some 6 points to put across based on your guest today morning, Steve Ogola. One, on this ground on postponement of election. Yesterday, Sihanya put it very clearly, like there are some 3 grounds on which an election can be postponed. And when you look at those 3 grounds, as per the time the elections were being done, those grounds were not peculiar, but as per that time. Secondly, when you say that there was some mismatch in photos, it is based on the ground that IEBC never did their work well. So it's like the voter is infringed over his rights, and as you look at things that are going on, it can have an effect when it is conducted, either now or after. Secondly, the commissioners said it very well, like there was like a back end in which Chebukati was going to receive those results. In as much as we are being told that everything was on the portal, we need to agree that these were just mere optic. If somebody says he goes to the back end, what happens at the back end? Why can't all commissioners access the back end? And when you look at the conduct of at the Bombers, when the chair was before he was announcing the results, he didn't mention the whereabouts of his 4 commissioners. And this happened, the 4 commissioners were addressing the press even before Chebukati made a declaration. And when Chebukati is saying that his commissioners wanted the results to be moderated, is just rebattling what the commissioners had said earlier. As citizens, if this happened earlier, it would have come in Chebukati's declaration that I have my commissioners who are not with me. They wanted this and this. So it is not coming out clearly. Lastly, it's as if we are picking from where we left. When you look at Supreme Court ruling to 2017, it was discovered that some of the players got access into the IEBC portal 300 times. And you see the allegations are still live even in this time. We cannot substantiate them yet, but they may surface. Because this aspect of back-end room. So it is upon IEBC to come clearly and explain to people what happened at the back end, who are those people supposed to access the back end room.
Okay.
All right, Joshua. Well, thank you, Joshua. He said he had 6 points. I noted at least 3 because the third one is tied to a number of things. Speaking of IEBC, and I think I'll throw this to just the 3 of you to make comments. One, he raises issues of, the grounds of postponement, and I think that's what we were discussing earlier on, what the Constitution makes clear of what then can lead to a postponement of an election. I think we handled that. Now, the issue of photos being uploaded on the IEBC portal, he's talking about the whole idea being just mere optics. And there was another access, the back-end access to these forms. He says Chebukati didn't mention the whereabouts of the 4 commissioners when he was making the announcement of the presidential results.
I think at that point they'd already made their whereabouts public.
I will start with the Okili Charles.
I think in 2017 the Supreme Court faulted IEBC for being a bit opaque in the way the results transmission system worked. IEBC had deployed a sophisticated system which included the KIMS kit. Presiding officers were required to take a photo or to scan the results declaration form, send it to Bomas, and they're also required to key in the number of votes for each candidate. So because they were sending numeric data, the numeric data was tallying or tabulating automatically. So we then had on the screen at Bomas this running tally that was being called provisional results, that helped Kenyans know quite early. In fact, by late the night of the elections, you already could see the trends of the voting. And by the day after, there was clarity about who was likely to win the elections. But allegations then were raised by the NASA team that there might be an algorithm that is taking the numeric data and altering it to create a predetermined difference between the winner and the loser. So they said there's an algorithm, that's why we are losing. And because the results were being tallied numerically very quickly, they were being called provisional results, then the allegation was, the second allegation was that possibly because this numeric tally is so evident even before the 34 Bs have been prepared, and while 34 A's in some places are still being prepared, people are actually altering. The presiding officers at the polling station level, the constituency returning officers, actually altering the forms to this predetermined outcome. And so the Supreme Court took these allegations or claims very seriously, as they are meant to, because they are a court of law. And they asked IEBC, please open the server. We want to know whether anyone had access to your system, whether there was any algorithm. And then you remember that drama in which IEBC was a bit reluctant to open their server. They gave several claims about security challenges and so on. And eventually, when the court gave a ruling that they opened the server, they said that, oh, the server is hosted in France. We couldn't reach our operators in France. They're asleep. So they gave only partial access as opposed to the full access required. That partial access was still useful for the party agents to download some data, but the court concluded that it wasn't complete access. And that's one of the reasons why IEBC results were faulted. This time, IEBC structured the platform differently. First of all, they removed the numeric data, so that the only thing that was being sent were these scanned photos. And because there are 46,000 polling stations, even yourselves as the media houses, you tried to tally. It was a big job. It took over 2 days. You even gave up on the job when it became too tough for you. In the case of IEBC, they took 3 days, and they were not tallying on their own. They were tallying as they verify in the presence of the agents. And then the IEBC did something else. They opened the portal so that everyone could get the forms the moment they were uploaded. So that if indeed it is true, because it is a claim that is being made now, if indeed it is true that, number one, someone got access to the portal, then the logs of the server should be able to show it. and IEBC will be able to demonstrate, did anyone get access to the portal? Number two, if indeed someone uploaded, then downloaded the authentic forms and put in new forms, then the whole world should know, because there are many people who are downloading the forms as they kept being uploaded, and you did not need to download 46,000 forms, because they were collated together at a constituency level. So it was easy to download the forms. And then number three, if indeed there was a substitution of Form 34As, because the agents were meant to get copies of those Form 34As at the polling station just after the results were announced, then indeed they should be able to come and say, this is a form that the carbon copy that my agent got at such and such a polling station, just look at it. This is the form that has been uploaded. You can see the signatures are different. You can see the totals are different. And I can tell you, because in 2017, I handled an election petition in which my client, who was the petitioner, was actually able to show that the Form A's, this was a gubernatorial case, were different to the ones that eventually IEBC had produced. But don't forget that in the case of the other elections, gubernatorial, member of National Assembly, and so on, the result declaration forms did not come to this public portal where we could access. So it was more possible to do mischief of exchanging. So it's almost as if IEBC deployed a system which was meant to be more transparent than 2017 to shift the burden of proof to the person alleging shifting of or replacement of forms, substitution of forms, to be the one to demonstrate how it happened. And I'm not saying that it is not possible to demonstrate. It might be demonstrated, but now the burden of proof is on the petitioners to show that indeed this happened, and to be able to elaborate to the court the narrative of how it could have happened. Because IEBC will just say, look, these are the result declaration forms. They are downloaded by people all over the place. Even yourselves as the media downloaded them. You may be ready to come in as interested parties and say, these are the ones we got. Are the ones that are being alleged to have been uploaded and downloaded, the genuine ones. So that is on the question of the substitution of the forms. But on the separate question about the tallies, that is a very weighty issue. It is a weighty issue because, again, the Supreme Court in 2017 said, we don't see any genuine, authentic reason why there can be a difference in the totals between presidential ballot, gubernatorial, Senate, women rep. If when you add up the totals and you include the spoiled and rejected votes, there is a difference, then we need an explanation. The explanation may well be that there was some malpractice at the gubernatorial level or the Senate level, because maybe if there are differences in the votes, maybe the alteration was in those other votes, maybe those ones which did not go to the public portal were altered. But the burden in that case will have shifted to IEBC to explain why is there a difference in the totals. And it will not be enough for IEBC to say, we don't know, because they have to give an explanation that is persuasive to the court. So if the reports are true, that there are significant differences in places like Homa Bay, in some places in Mount Kenya region, we don't know. Those are the claims that are being made by Azimio. But if those claims of differences in totals are true, the burden now shifts to IEBC to explain, to give a cogent explanation, a clear narrative. How could this have happened if every voter receives 6 ballot voters? Even if they decide not to cast the vote for the other seats, they still have to insert that ballot paper in the ballot box. So the 6 totals should match. And if they're not matching, that is now for IEBC to explain how did it happen, because it's their officers, the returning officers, the presiding officers who have collated all these totals. So they'll need to give a logical explanation.
Okay. Carol, what is your textual reading of the situation?
I actually agree with Wakili, especially on the point number 2 that Azimio are raising, which, as I said before, goes back to 2017. If you're given 6 ballots, where are the others? And as Wakili says, maybe it's not just the mischief was not at the presidential level, maybe the mischief was down here. So not to belabor that point, I want to address what the caller said about this just being mere optics, how IEBC was uploading the forms onto the portal. I think we need to be a bit fair to the IEBC, to reduce, to do a reductive analysis and say this was just mere optics. At the back end, there were people who were just, you know, there was massaging of the figures going on in the background. I think it's unfair to reduce the work of the IEBC, because based on the judgment that happened at the Supreme Court in 2017, where the servers were closed, you know, that whole front story, our people are asleep, they're not answering their phones are switched off. This time round, the forms 34A were on the portal right from day one. We finished voting, you went in and you could see them beginning to populate the forms. And everybody rushed in there to begin to download them. So to say this was just, you know, it was just mere optics. Everybody, we even had independent tallies that were being done by people who are not necessarily, don't want to say completely, not necessarily political. Because like I said, numbers are political, counting is everything is political. But even the people who are doing independent tallying, there's even a young man on Twitter who created an app where you could go, you would click on it and he would show you how he was doing the tallying. To say that this was mere optics and there was and I know the language of back end, you know, the back end massaging and monkey business came from what the 4 commissioners said, that they were not allowed back end. And then the questions were, what does, when you say you are not given back end access, and the back end access only appeared to be in the hands of the chair of the IEBC, what does that mean? What does back-end access mean? And what does that back-end access entail? So those are questions that need to be answered, because if we just say there was no back-end access, therefore what it means is that we are opening that to interpretation that back-end access means we open and everybody is getting in there to do their own thing. Therefore then, what these 4 commissioners are saying is that they were not given back-end access to do what they wanted in the portal. And in that sense, then that's a good thing. But on the flip side of that is that what they are now implying is that the person who had this so-called back-end access was doing the same thing that they were not allowed to do. So all narratives for me, and I think it's also what Wakili to my right was saying, these sweeping statements are very dangerous, especially when they're vague. What is back-end? What is opaque? What is the phase, the final phase? So all these statements that are now being out there, what we are doing is that we are giving the public runaway narratives to create different kinds of conspiracy theories, etc., etc. So to address that question specifically around mere optics, I don't really think this was mere optics. I think IEBC was forestalling what happened in 2017 and saying we were told that our servers were closed, we were told we were doing monkey business and there was an algorithm. So now what we will do from day one is just to upload everything on the portal and let there be open access. Is that the level of open access people wanted? That's a question for another day. Because at the end of the day, when they said fungua server, what did that mean?
Okay.
So those are the issues that I think we really need to interrogate very carefully, and not just throw words out there, there was no back-end access, this is just mere optics. We need to give credit where it's due. IEBC did something new. There was transparency right from the beginning. We have to give credit to the IEBC for that, and not use phrases and slogans like back-end access to try and say that something was being done by someone. What was that something, and what is this back-end access? These are things we need to understand.
All right. So, Steve, before I invite you to respond to James's concerns, let's hear from Wandia in Nakuru. Wandia, if you can hear me, do go ahead.
Yeah, how are you?
Morning.
Yes, thank you. Hello?
Yes, do go ahead, Wandia. Keep going.
Okay, number one, I want to commend the IEBC for their good work this time. They have tried to be transparent. And one thing that we must realize, an exercise of this magnitude cannot call for 100% in excellency. They have tried, And for me, I commend them. They have been open this time. They have tried humanly to be open. For that, I commend the IEBC. Number two, I want to concur with Lawyer Ogola on the constitutional mandate of the commissioners. One thing I want to ask about the commissioners is that when the four descended from the bombers of Kenya, it was sort of very, it looked like it had been choreographed. I don't know how to say it, because immediately Chepkati was announcing the announcement. They were at the Serena Hotel at the same time. The media was there. They had been organized. And when they started talking, it was also moving on at the bombers of Kenya. So this is something that had been organized. For me, as an ordinary Kenyan, I don't take them in the light of the day. There was something behind it. Because number one, as a commissioner, they should understand their constitutional mandate. They should understand that even if they differ with the chairman, they should have put it in writing at the back of the office and later on release their concerns to the people that are concerned, not in the glare of the nation. The nation had waited for 6 days for this announcement. What was their motive to go to the press and talk to the nation directly? I don't concur with them. They should be also investigated, because going to the press and telling the nation it was not right. They should understand their constitutional mandate. When you go to such an office, you should have thick skin. You cannot be soft. You can articulate your issues without going to the press, because they have a board. Number three, I want to ask if it is the duty of the commissioners to count the votes or their staff at the back. There is a secretariat, and I believe that they were the ones tabulating the results. If the four commissioners did not agree, first of all, they should have asked the people at the back if those accounts were right. So personally, I want to thank the chairman, Mr. Chepkati. He may have not done the right thing, but he did what was needful at that particular time.
Well,
and I want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
And want to thank you, Wandia, for taking the time to contribute to our conversation this morning. Steve, Wandia mentioned you by name, so I'll invite you to respond first. I've got two questions. Dennis is who's the note taker in this partnership. But the two questions I'm getting from her, she's saying, is it not the Secretariat that does the tallies? And second, can the investigative agencies come in and try to sort out this mess, separate the truth from fiction?
I think the short answer is we can anticipate a constitutional petition that interrogates the suitability of these four commissioners to continue serving. This, what they did, can be tantamount to constitutional sabotage of their own mandate. The Constitution does not anticipate intra-institutional turbulence to this level that was demonstrated by these four commissioners. If the High Court was invited to interrogate their suitability, especially their sense of judgment, which includes common sense and practical and reflection on the practical consequences of their decisions, my fear is they will fall short of the expectation of that office of the commissioners. What would be the next step? The next step would be someone could use that as a guideline judgment and petition Parliament under Article 250 to initiate the process of removal of these four commissioners. So the removal of these four commissioners is not entirely far-fetched. They could actually be removed. Once you have a judgment that impugns their suitability, integrity, and capability to understand the law and also election management, including communication with the public, then you could petition. The law says if you petition Parliament and Parliament is satisfied, and Parliament would have no reason to reject that invitation to interrogate the commissioners if there's a guideline judgment on their suitability. Then the President would then, they would make a recommendation to the President. The President would then establish a tribunal that would then make a final finding whether they should be removed or not. In my own assessment, the 4 commissioners are in fact in a perfect constitutional setting on their way out. We cannot encourage such a dangerous pattern in an important commission such as the Iebc. But now, earlier on I talked about the charitable assumptions that their concerns were genuine. Let us now not make assumptions. Let us locate, because 2 callers have commented on it. Let us locate who has the constitutional and legal obligation to tally and declare the results at the national level. If you look at Article 86 of the Constitution, 86C, it says that results from, not at, the results from the polling station shall be tallied, shall be verified and announced by the chairperson of by the returning officer applicable to that election. To the extent that the results relate to county assembly and constituency, and the constituency level and the county union rep, the fate of that results will be announced, will be declared by the constituency returning officer. The governor will be announced by the county returning officer. The presidential election will be announced by the national returning officer. Now, you look at Article 88, Article 138.10, which expressly states that the chairperson of the commission shall declare the results. Again, join that with Regulation 87, Sub-Regulation 3 of the Election General Regulations 2012 that says that the chairperson of the commission shall verify, Dennis, verify. The chairperson shall verify.
Okay, Steve, just a quick minute. You said Article 86, the first one? Article 86.
Check C, just read on the results from the polling station
are openly and accurately collated and promptly announced by the returning officer.
And I'm saying, now we want to build consensus on who announces the results, okay. who is responsible for the tallying, the verification, and the declaration. Yeah.
So now I head to 138.
Article 86 talks about the returning officer. The returning officer for the presidential election and the chairman, and if there is doubt, look at Article 138. Sub-Article 10.
138, Sub-Article 10. Sorry, I was just scrolling up one quick second.
And Olive, as you're scrolling through to just get
I've gotten it.
Oh, you found it?
Yes. 10, right?
Yes.
Within 7 days after the presidential election, the chairperson of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall A, declare the results of the election.
Just that.
Okay.
Now, if you look at Article 86, read together with Article 138.10, the consensus within those, if you harmonize those provisions, the chairperson is the returning officer for the presidential election. But if you doubted that, regulation which you may not have now, if you didn't download it earlier, Regulation 87, Sub-Regulation 3 of the Election General Regulations 2012 expressly state that the chairperson of the commission shall verify those results, shall verify and tally those results in that language, and then declare. Now, the commission, in my view, the chairman of the commission, Mr. Chebukati, went beyond his constitutional mandate by co-opting these commissioners. If you look at a reading of that constitution, the provisions of the law, the person who can be held accountable for the results that have been declared is the chairman. The commissioners could as well sit on the high table, sip coffee, make merry and be happy. But they were co-opted, and when the results were arriving, the returning officers were arriving, they announced that the process of verification was taking between 3 to 5 hours. And I saw people tweeting and saying that if it takes 3 to 5 hours of verification, we may need more days. You get?
At that time, none of the commissioners raised a concern. In fact, these commissioners that were upon verification, they were declared, they were announcing these results. So once, let's say the BA East has been verified and announced, does it matter that that form that was used to declare has been taken to some back-end office, or that it has been placed? You know, the thing is this, what I see is the elevation of peripheral issues to the election where now we are using them to determine the fate of an election. I want to say this with clarity of mind. The fate of this election will not be determined by what happens at Bomas to the extent that the commissioners allege they were not involved. They were involved. Yes.
Okay, so sorry to just cut you short. I'm told we have another caller. This is Dixon from Kisii. Dixon from Kisii. Your contribution or your question?
Yeah, good morning, Dennis and Oliver.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yeah, just need just a clarification from Council Stephen Kanjama. There's this thing called valid vote, rejected vote, and casted, I don't know, casted vote. When we go to the polling station, we have the Kim kit, which identifies somebody's everything. Then that thing gives percentage of those who voted. Then what I want clarification from Charles and Steve is, will the valid votes tally with what the Kim kit gives us? Because we are told that around 113,000 people, their votes are not valid. What of the Kim kit? Will it rectify what is in the Kim kit? I just needed a brief clarification on that one. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dixon. That's Dixon from Kisii.
Going to progress, which will cover what he has asked. There's something very important that Charles raised. I just want to develop it because that could actually determine the fate of this election, the discrepancies in the actual votes. The unexplained votes, let's say there's a higher threshold, there's a higher figure cast, number of votes cast for the president and others. My further input to that is just to advance that argument. I adopt fully what you said. What I have a different view on is this. That is not entirely the obligation of the commission. Yes, it's indicative of a problem, but it's not dispositive of how that election was managed. Because remember, this election is conducted in the presence of agents and observers. I think the people alleging discrepancies, first of all, courts have said that discrepancies, first we know from election law jurisprudence that discrepancies are commonplace. And discrepancies in and of themselves do not necessarily determine the fate of an election. And that's why Section 83 of the determine the, you know, there's going to be a debate, because Charles, you'll recall, in one of the petitions, Section 83 was amended when Parliament needed to limit the Supreme Court's ability to interfere with the results. The Supreme Court had read it disjunctively, and therefore they amended "or" and say "and" substantially in compliance with the Constitution, and the results are affected. But if you look at Section 83 of the Constitution, already it sets a threshold. It says election will not be, the outcome of that election will not be interfered with if it has been shown that it was conducted substantially in compliance with the law, with the Constitution and the election laws. The qualification of substantially in compliance means that by design of the law recognizes there may be minor infractions, some irregularities that could be explained in terms of errors of transposition, fatigue, and so on and so forth, that do not necessarily rise to the level where those discrepancies can determine the fate of that election. So it is not enough to allege discrepancies. You have to show that these discrepancies, if left unexplained, could actually determine the fate of this election. We will wait to see, because I can't say that on national TV that I have seen those discrepancies, because I don't know how those discrepancies look like. Can they reach to the level where they determine the fate of that election? And then the corollary question that would arise is this. Since the Court of Appeal has already stated that election happens at the polling station, and the law permits agents to be there and candidates to be there, you have to show, when we're auditing the results, some residual minimum level of honesty. This form Because you will have to impugn particular results in particular polling stations. Were these forms signed by agents? Because Olive, if you vote in polling station A, the results have been announced, you've signed on it, it is pasted on the door, you've gone with a copy, then you come and say, the votes in this polling station do not reflect the number of, you ought to have raised that at that level and disputed it. The law permits multiple recounts. You can demand a first recount, you can demand a second recount. Before then, the presiding officer can close all issues around that declaration of the results in that polling station. We wait to see a breakdown of this alleged influence. Because in that court, it will not be enough to say there's a pattern of vote inflation. How does vote inflation happen? How did it happen? Which polling stations were your agents there? So you also have some obligation to say you validated these results at the polling station, having observed it as an agent on behalf of your on behalf of your principal. Observers were there. If you allow, and Kenya is, I'm not saying this to excuse the commission, but I'm telling you, Dennis, with some level of appreciation, and Charles will understand this. The context in which elections are held requires that candidates and political parties comply with the election laws. Look at Article 140 of the Constitution. It does anticipate the election on the conduct of the commission, because otherwise, how do you conduct fresh election in 60 days? The other thing that, so the light focus is, I'd rather you focus on the candidate, but this obsession with the commission was falsifying when it has actually done everything to ensure transparency and accountability, can actually inhibit your ability to have a broader appreciation of election management. The last point, I doubt, and maybe Charles needs to reflect on this more and maybe just comment on it. I genuinely doubt if the Supreme Court will permit the 4 commissioners to file an affidavit that challenges the official position of the commission. Because the law does not anticipate a split opinion in court. The results that are being challenged are not Chebukati's results. These are the commission results. And to the extent that you're a commissioner within the commission, it would not be possible in our constitutional design that a commissioner would then come in to challenge their own decision. I think that affidavit would be expunged from the record. The court would have to determine first, can these 4 commissioners genuinely participate in this election petition as to contradict the position taken by the commission? In my view, the court would not permit that.
You don't think the court will permit that?
I don't think the court will, and the court should not.
Okay, that. Charles Kanjama, do you think, to build on Steve Ogola's last point, on whether the 4 commissioners will be allowed by the Supreme Court to be enjoined in the petition, and building on that, going back to Dixon's question on valid votes, rejected votes, votes cast, the confusion comes in because you look at the voting patterns. This is now the Azimio 3-pronged strategy to look at the turnout, number 1. Number 2 is voting patterns, where Azimio will seek to know how hundreds of thousands of people voted for the president only without a corresponding number of spoiled ballots for lower seats.
Okay, and I adopt fully what my colleague here. But also, just to piggyback on what he's asked, also as you comment on the issue of valid votes that were raised by, that was the question that was raised by Dick, also the issue of time in an election this close. There seems to be some confusion as to, because Chebukati gave us a figure as far as the Kim's kits are concerned, the turnout, but now the manual verification of voter identity, that now in kidogo kuna changamoto. And Caroline, we have not forgotten you. I'm asking you to reflect on what President Uhuru Kenyatta, I love the way the Americans pronounce it, what President Uhuru Kenyatta has had to say about the election this far. He broke his silence yesterday. Charles.
So there are roughly 2 questions that you are asking me to deal with. The first is a question from Dixon about the voter turnout figures. And let me bring it clearly. that in 2013, Supreme Court was presented with a petition in which the question was, how do you determine the valid votes cast? Because Article 138 of the Constitution, which deals with the presidential election, says that the winner should have more than half of all valid votes cast, or of all votes cast. And the question is, what are the valid votes cast? Does that include spoiled or rejected votes? And the Supreme Court answered the question by saying that in determining whether you have reached 50% plus 1, which is the Commission shorthand for the constitutional threshold, you don't consider the spoiled or rejected votes. That is in terms of the constitutional test of have you reached 50%. But in regards to IEBC processes, they have to announce all the valid votes cast for each candidate and also the spoiled or rejected votes. And that total that includes the spoiled or rejected votes should be consistent from one race to the other. Because even if a voter decides to deliberately spoil their vote or not to cast a ballot for a particular party, they are required by IEBC regulations and processes to still deposit that ballot paper in the ballot box. So, and because IEBC processes require that they are given 6 ballot papers, 1 for each race, then each of the 6 ballot boxes should have the same overall total. Some of those votes will not be valid, they'll be spoiled or rejected votes, but the total of the valid plus the spoiled votes must tally, or should tally. And if there are any significant discrepancies, it is open to question. It may be possible that a particular voter put 1 ballot in the presidential ballot, and then he put 2 in the gubernatorial and missed any in the MCA ballot. You know, those kind of like small discrepancies could happen because there are so many people queuing and voting. It may happen for 1 or 2 that they cast more than 1 ballot in 1 box, and in another box they didn't cast a ballot. But you know, you have agents, you have the polling clerks. It's not something that is likely to occur frequently. So if the totals are different by 10 or 15, you can argue that this was voter error at the polling station. But if the totals are more significantly different, like 50 or 100, then it begs the question. Your caller Dixon was also asking about the Kim's kit and the voter turnout figures. And let me explain that one of the measures IEBC has put in place to secure the integrity of the voting and the authenticity of the results is that every 3 hours on voting day, at 9 a.m., at 12 p.m., at 3 p.m., at 5 or at the close of voting, the presiding officer who has been keeping a tally of the number of votes that have been cast is meant to send the data to IEBC. How many votes have been cast as at this time? In addition, because the voters are being identified by the Kim's kit, you don't just do a physical tally. The Kim's kit should be able to tell you so many voters have been identified. There might be a slight discrepancy in the Kim's kit. Maybe there is a voter that put his fingerprints. Kim's kit considered the voter identified, but he did not recognize with the beep. And the voter was told, go and come back. So again, there could be slight discrepancies. But overall, the discrepancy cannot be so significant as to raise a question as to, if you told us the percentage or the number was so much, how come the total votes are different? But allow me to add some point, which I think is very important, because I've noticed in the discussion that's been happening in the country, there's been a confusion between principal data or principal numbers or figures and derived data or derived number of figures. Percentages are derived data. They are not the principal data. The principal data is the number, is the numeric figure of so many people have voted. So the obsession with Chebukati said 60% or 65 or 67% may not necessarily be what turns the election. The question is the principal figures. Did Chebukati say the number of voters who had voted with the Kim's kit, because the percentage who had voted from the principal figure. If you tell me 14.4 million voters have voted and then the total is 14.2 million, that's a discrepancy. But if it's an issue of percentage, which is a derived figure, you could have made an error when you are computing the percentage, one person or the other. I don't know whether you understand me. So I think the key thing is, can we get from the principal figures, the numbers, whether there has been that discrepancy? And then the final response to Dixon is that yes, because some voters were identified manually, the total number of votes cast should include the total turnout that came from the Kim's kit, plus the additional who were recognized manually. But my belief is that when the presiding officers were sending the tallies, they were including both those in the Kim's kit and those who've been identified manually, so that the results coming from IEBC presiding officers every 3 hours were likely to be all-inclusive. So on the question of whether the spoilt votes affect the tally, they don't affect the total turnout, but they affect the figures or the votes attributed to each candidate. And then now to that second question. Yes. The second question was on the question of the differences. Just remind me again, Dennis.
The differences between valid votes, rejected votes, votes cast, spoiled votes. That's what Dixon wanted. A clarification.
Yes, I've cleared that.
Yes. The question that I wanted, because you've talked about two figures. You said the primary figure,
yes,
principal figure,
and the derived,
yes, and the derived figure. Now, this is how this presidential petition, according to this article and the Daily Nation, is likely to be framed. Yes. And the three issues that Azimio would likely be raising. One is on the issue on voter turnout. So the contention now here is that Chebukati initially reported a figure of 65.4%, which would then translate to 14,466,779.
Yes, and then there is a difference of 143.
Yes, yes. So, however, the final tally that was announced by
14.2 million.
Yes, that 0.2 million of total valid votes and 113,614 rejected ballots, which would then add up to 14.3.
Yes, I think the argument of Azimio is that 65.4% is 14.4.
Yes.
While when you add 14.2 plus the rejected votes, you get to 14.3.
Which then leaves a difference of 140,000.
Yes. So if that argument is demonstrated, it can overturn the result. By overturning, I mean take the threshold of William Ruto below 50% and take us into a runoff. So it's a very serious allegation. And IEBC will need to demonstrate whether that announcement of Chebukati was misinterpreted, what was the data that he had, because of course he may have made an announcement of 65.4% and he used a different total when deriving that figure. That's why I'm saying derived figures are not the principal figure. So the burden will shift to Chebukati to demonstrate what was the basis of his announcement. Did he announce both the primary figure or the principal figure and the derived figure, or he just announced the percentage? I didn't see the video. You as the media will be the ones to tell us what the video says, and then Chebukati will come with his papers and say, this is the data I had. But if he's not able to disprove that claim of Azimio, then the court might probably say, let's go for a runoff, because we are not sure that Ruto has reached 50% plus one extra vote. So that's a significant issue. And then, of course, there's also the point that my colleague
the point about the commission?
Sorry?
The point about the four commissioners being part of the petition?
Yes, about the four commissioners. And I think I should respond to it. You know, when you are a lawyer acting for a party, you always take a partisan position. So if I'm the lawyer for Kenya Kwanza, I will argue that those four commissioners should not show up in court, that the commission has one official position and the lawyers should just present the official position. And if I'm the lawyer for Azimio, I'll say no. The country should hear from these four commissioners, because it is about the accuracy, transparency and verifiability of the results, and that is required under Article 81 and 86 of the Constitution. I'll tell you what I will do if I'm a Supreme Court judge, and I've told you before. My job is to get all the relevant facts and then determine on the basis of the facts and the law what is the fair and just outcome. Okay. I can tell you if I'm a judge, and I think it is very likely that the judges would probably do the same. I cannot speak for them. I'll want to hear from those 4 commissioners as well.
All right.
Tell me, because they are stakeholders, the same way anyone can apply to be an interested party in court. I don't think there's any party who has greater interest in these results than the 4 and the 3 commissioners, because they officially are the representatives of the commission. So I think that it is really up to the 7 commissioners to meet and interact. They had a public fallout a few years ago. There may have been some misunderstandings. There may have been some things that may not have been done very well. But for the sake of the Constitutional Commission, they need to keep engaging. If they are able to come together and agree on a common position, the better. If they are not able to do it, I as a Supreme Court judge, if I was one, which I'm not, I'd want to hear from both sides.
Okay. But although, even if they reconcile, will it expunge from the public record what they've already publicly declared?
No, that is different, because you see, if they come together, they can always say, oh, there was a misunderstanding. We've not understood each other. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the fact that you make a statement, it might be an erroneous statement. You don't need to stubborn it. It might be on error. But if you still believe it, after the petition has been filed, me as a Supreme Court judge, I want to hear from you. What is that position that you believe in? All
right. Let's hear from James. James is calling us from Kisumu. James, if you can hear me, do go ahead.
Duncan?
Oh, Duncan, good morning. Sorry, I was misinformed. Now that we have understood each other, go ahead.
Yeah, my first question is...
Go ahead.
Can you get me?
Yes, yes, we are. Go ahead.
My question is, can you make me understand the role of observers in the election? Are observers observing how the voting process is? Then are they also observing the tallying? Are they there if the tallying process is going on? Another thing, the law says the chairman must declare presidential elect if there's some constituencies, if there are not constituencies, if every constituencies have returned their results. I didn't see the announcement of constituencies yesterday. Is there any law there? Another thing, as Steve says that it won't be necessary for the commissioners to represent their case in court. Yet again, he says the result is among the commissioner. Then, and the then commissioner are disputing the result. So, can he clarify that for me?
All right. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Duncan.
From Kisumu. I think we'll get answers to your questions about the observer's role during the voting process, or is it also inclusive of the tallying process, and also that whole confusion around when it comes to the announcement. I didn't quite get that last bit of that question, but...
about the constituencies.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Steve made reference to 2017, the 27 constituencies, and the commission considering practically will these make a difference to the final outcome.
Yes, but we'll take the responses after this short break.
Welcome back to AM Live, and I want us to get into this question that is posed by, or that is raised by Rigathi Gachagua on the front page of the Taifa Leo. Don't worry, gentlemen, you will have an opportunity to respond to Duncan. But Caroline, just to alert the view on where we are heading next, Gachagua, Uhuru hajaongea na Uhuru. Naruto, I beg your pardon. And then here he continues to say Rais Kenyatta hajawahi kuzungumza na Rais mteule Ruto tangu alipotangazwa mshindi. Naibu Rais mteule Rigathi Gachagua alifichua jana. And there is a tweet that has been making the rounds. Where is it? Yeah, here we go. And attributed to Peter Kagwanja. More than 20 heads of state, regional and international agencies have sent congratulatory messages to Kenya's president-elect, Dr. William Ruto. Shockingly, Kenya's state house is dead mute. True, it takes a nationalist to build a nation. And then when we look at the Daily Nation, Uhuru promises to lead a smooth handover of power. My greatest desire is that peace will prevail and we may set an example in the continent and the world. Carol, think about this as the two wakilis. You know, yesterday we were saying professor to my left, professor to my right. Leonie, wakili to my left, wakili to my right. As they respond to Duncan, does this surprise you? Did you expect him to say anything more than let's keep the peace and let the processes take their course? But first, Steve and Charles, Dennis, Duncan's questions.
Yes, Duncan was asking about the role of the observer groups that we see in every election cycle, going to polling stations, looking at the voting processes. Do they then play a big role when it comes to the tallying process? That was his question. Then the other issue was on the constituency, which I think you had addressed earlier. But let's look at the observer role, because we've had this discussion in this show this week, looking at a lot of them are coming out and saying the election was free, was fair, was credible, was peaceful, and all that. In their reports, do they hold anything significant? And I think I'll start with you, Charles.
Yes, thank you. Observers play a very significant role, because they give an independent third-party viewpoint as to whether elections are free and fair. And you have two sets of observers. You have domestic observers, and then you have foreign or international observers. And you could also say that the media, who are not formally observers, also play a role of observation of the results. I'll tell you that the times when I have been involved in election petitions, I always want to get the reports of observers and to attach them, whether it is to my petition or to my response, if they favor the point I'm taking across. And the judges are always interested in hearing what the observers have to say. The thing is that there are different kinds of observers. Observers come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. There are some observers who will go to 10 polling stations, so their observation report may not be very significant. ELOG, the election observers group, they visited 1,000 polling stations out of 46,000. They have a very clear methodology. They have come up with the figures even of projecting the voter turnout and so on. So their report will be more significant. Foreign observers who are deemed to be more independent, like the African Union Mission, their reports will be more significant. So observer reports are crucial in the election. But also let's not forget that they are not dispositive of the outcome. Because in 2017, the observers also gave a clean bill of health generally in their preliminary reports that they issued after the August elections. But the Supreme Court still overturned that election result. So not necessarily because observers have said one thing, the court will agree. And then to answer the second part of the question, observers do observe the whole process. Many times they reach the polling station before the polling has started. There are those observers who roam between several polling stations, and there are those who stay in one polling station. They witness the whole process. They witness the counting, the results declaration, and then they send their reports to their own, you could call them tallying centers or their own coordination centers, where they prepare the reports. Apart from the parent report or the overall report, sometimes they have underlying data. What has been unfortunate is that a lot of that underlying data has ordinarily not been made public or even given to the courts. But if I'm in a high-stakes case and I'm able to get the underlying data from the observers, then I would look for it because it might even strengthen my case if I'm acting for a petitioner or a respondent.
Okay, Dennis, if you don't mind. Steve, do you adopt fully Charles's submissions?
That's accurate.
Okay, correct. So that I can move things along. Carol, on to you now. Uhuru promises smooth power handover at a meeting with clerics and U.S. delegation. There's a photo here of Raila Odinga meeting the U.S. congressional delegation. William Ruto did the same. I can see Uhuru Kenyatta met them as well. No congratulations yet, though. He has promised a smooth handover of power, transfer of power, but no congratulations yet.
Yes, I think President Uhuru Kenyatta is in a little bit of a pickle. And for me, every time we analyze anything, we have to look at the history so that we analyze things from a point of information. There hasn't been a situation in the country where a sitting president openly came out to campaign for a particular candidate. Even the late Kibaki did not do that. In as much as there were, there was an issue that he didn't particularly want Uhuru and Ruto to take over. He did not, come out publicly and hit the campaign trail. Uhuru appeared to do that, especially towards the tail end of the campaign period. So I think he finds himself in a little bit of a bind. He went out, he was openly campaigning for the Azimio party. He is on record, I think there's a record that he sits on the chair. Is it the chair? Is the chair of Azimio? So there was high stakes for him in this particular election. And obviously, his candidate did not win as per what result the Iebc chair announced. So for him, I think, there is no history for us to go back and say, the other president did this and etc, etc. But I also think there's a lot of eyes on him right now. Should he have come out to congratulate? That's a very difficult question to answer. Because if you campaign vociferously and actively for one candidate and then that candidate loses, what does it mean? However, we shouldn't sit here and say because his candidate didn't win, therefore it means even though he's feeling bad, he might be having, he might have caught feelings over this. Should we then say that that means he will not hand over power or he's reluctant to hand over power? I don't think he has that choice. I don't think he can say my candidate didn't win, so I'm not going to do this. The Constitution does not allow him to hold on to power because the candidate of his choice has not won the election. The transition of power from one president to another is already established. It's already there in law. The steps that need to occur for power to move on from one administration to the next is already there. So I don't think, even though he has promised a smooth handover of power, really what was he going to do? Was he going to hang on to the curtains of State House and say, I'm not leaving? At the end of the day, he's served his 2 terms, and it's time for him to exit stage, regardless, or to use his own word, irregardless of who is going to take over. I don't think he has a choice to say that I want to hang on to power, so I don't think he has that choice.
I think you mentioned, Carol, that we've not seen a situation where we have a sitting president backing
in Kenya.
In 2002, I recall the late President Moi backed Uhuru Kenyatta and openly started campaigning for him. And I recall even telling Musalia Mudavadi, who was also a candidate then, to back Uhuru, but the project failed, what you call the famous Uhuru project. It failed. But to the point that you've just raised about the president not having any other option but to just hand over power in this smooth transition, I think on what Olive was looking at, the Daily Nation, this is on page 7, the analysts were arguing, no congratulations yet. Political analyst Mokwa says the president's silence may be due to the impending petition.
I imagine this is Dismas Mokwa?
Yes. I mean, Steve, do you think he's quiet and very silent because he's still waiting to see what happens?
Well, I think the president was silent partly because, as the chairperson of Azimio, his candidate is contesting the results, and reasonably can be understood to mean that he has also rejected the results, because this is the party. We've not yet seen the division. So you could explain his silence in that context. But If his silence compromises the stability of the nation, then he has to rise beyond that, his position as a mere chairperson and speak as a statesman, the head of state, you know, and then say, while we await the outcome of the court processes, if the court processes affirm the outcome of the election, of course we shall respect, and I urge all Kenyans to remain calm. That statement is not becoming necessary because Kenyans have raised his concerns over his silence. It doesn't do harm to Azimio's challenge to the election result if he speaks as a head of state, because he could carefully balance. He could say the Constitution already provides a predictable pathway under Article 140 for anyone who is aggrieved with the outcome of an election to question those elections in court, and that decision can only be made by the candidate. So to the extent that the candidate has made that decision, we have to recognize and respect that. However, as the head of state, we also recognize that the commission has made a declaration of the person they have returned as the president-elect. At this advanced stage, we recognize that. Those who want to congratulate him, I join them in congratulating him, but that does not mean endorsement as finality. Yeah? So he could create that balance to allow so that he doesn't put the right honorable former prime minister in a political embarrassing position where he could be misread, his statement could be misread, that now he thinks the election was well managed when Raila is questioning it. But also he cannot overprotect Raila Odinga to the extent that he compromises the tranquility and the cohesion in the country. So I think that is just where we are right now as a country. I think it's important that he does more than just saying a land over power.
Okay. All right. Charles, I'll ask you to weigh in on this last issue. Daily Nation, Denisini page gani? Page 6. Blow to Raila as UDM ditches Azimio. David Ohito here, UDM Secretary General. We're in talks and technical teams, including party lawyers, are meeting to finalize a post-election pact. Is it the day before yesterday, was it, Dennis, when William Ruto met elected leaders in Karen? And we were informed that a certain number of independents were now backing Kenya Kwanza, would be backing Kenya Kwanza in Parliament. And prior to even the elections, as the curtains, I wouldn't say come to a close, but as we approach the general election, you know, Carol, you've put the picture of Uhuru holding on to curtains in my head. But as we look towards the election, we saw PA. The Pamoja African Alliance and Mendeleo Chap move out of Azimio. This is after we saw people signing things at the KICC. They said they didn't know what they signed, but we saw people signing things. They left the coalition party for Kenya Kwanza to support a presidential bid by William Ruto. I am now confused. I thought the amendments to the Political Parties Act were meant to prevent this.
So there are three things. There is the legal, the factual, and the political. So legally speaking, any party that is in a coalition can exit the coalition, enter another coalition, so long as they follow the law in the Political Parties Act and the constitution of documents of that coalition. And what we know from the Azimio coalition is you need to give a notice, I think, of 6 months. So that is the legal process. You can leave, you can join another coalition. And the law regarding independent candidates is that if you are elected as an independent candidate and then you stop being independent by joining a political party, that is enough reason for you to lose your seat. So you have to continue as an independent. But the law doesn't say anything about coalitions. And so in the case of Azimio, they are both a coalition and a party. So if you purport to join Azimio, which is a party, as an independent, then clearly you would have violated the law. There is some gray area regarding Kenya Kwanza because they are not a party, they are just a coalition. And the question is, as an independent candidate, can you formally join a coalition, or it is only informal? I think that's a legal area or legal issue which is still a bit gray. That's the legal. Then what is the factual? The factual is that PA and Mendeleo Chap, even though they are legally speaking still in the Azimio coalition, for all intents and purposes, they moved and they started supporting Kenya Kwanza, factually. And this is the same thing with UDM. Even though it will take them a number of months to legally exit Azimio, factually they have already moved. And the 10 independent candidates who have now said they will support Kenya Kwanza, even if they remain officially independent, factually, they are going to Kenya Kwanza. So this is giving a kind of like momentum to Kenya Kwanza, and they are trying to create a perception of inevitability. We have won. Even the Supreme Court judges, when they are determining the case, sometimes they wonder what are the consequences of us giving a certain declaration, because courts don't like to act in vain. And I think for Kenya Kwanza, they want to create that inevitability of government in waiting. We're already forming, we're already doing so many things. We are building our majorities. Even if we went for a fresh election or repeat election or runoff, it's a matter that's inevitable. In fact, we'll now get the votes from Mandera, which we didn't have. We'll get more votes from Coast, from Western. So that's the factual thing that also goes to the political, which I wanted to speak about last. So that is the factual. And the factual is that they are also heavily wooing individual MPs from KANU, I've seen, and a few other parties who may not formally leave their political party because there are legal consequences, but factually might end up supporting Kenya Kwanza according to their strategy that we have seen being unveiled. So while Azimio is so focused on the court case, because for them it's a matter of life and death, Kenya Kwanza is focused on forming government. Legally speaking, the leader of the majority party or coalition gets a certain role in parliament. And when parliament convenes, the leader of majority, based on the law, is going to be the person Azimio choose, because they got the most seats, legally speaking.
Yeah, I was actually going to come and ask you that. What do these defections mean?
Yeah, but factually speaking, when they vote for the speaker, you vote individually. So based on the current dynamic, the speaker is likely to come from Kenya Kwanza, while the leader of majority will be from Azimio. So and this may change in future. So that's why you have to distinguish the legal and the factual based on the current situation. And then the political is derived from that. And the political is how you leverage the legal and the factual to achieve political objectives. In the case of Kenya Kwanza, the political objective they want to achieve is twofold. One, to become the dominant governing party, and two, to create that perception that they are already dominant, so that in the event there is a runoff, the margin even grows. That's their political objective. On the side of Azimio, they'll be arguing that, look, this Kenya Kwanza, they told us they want clean politics. They want to have opposition. They don't like the handshake. Aren't they also doing the handshake? Aren't they going to become dictators? Can't we rebel against them? So each side will make political mileage or capital out of the current developments.
Okay. And I see here Dennis Galava on page 4. His assessment is that the 13th Parliament is going to be a hung house. This means that the Azimio formation with 162 elected members has only a slight majority over Kenya Kwanza with 159. In principle, Azimio is going to be the majority in the National Assembly and is expected to provide the lead of majority, while Kenya Kwanza of the President-elect William Ruto will provide the lead of minority. And allied leaders in the Assembly, it's an awkward situation in which the government will rely on support from the opposition in order for it to successfully conduct business in the House. But away from this and hanging houses and things, Steve, there's a question we haven't answered, and if we can answer it in 3 minutes, because Winnie Lubembe is coming in with Your World at 9 p.m. A.M. My goodness, Dennis, it's not just, anyway, what day is it? Steve, this thing of 2/3, Maraga, 12th Parliament recommended that it be dissolved on account of not meeting that threshold. What happens now?
What happens is that we have to compute the number of elected women in the 290 constituencies and then add that to the 47 county women reps that also sit in the National Assembly, and then add that to the 6 slots that are reserved for women in the nominated seats. Then we will get the percentage. The minimum number of women that are needed within the 2/3 gender principle is 117 women in the National Assembly. If we fall short even by 1, then Parliament, in terms of the law on composition, shall have violated the composition of Parliament shall not be consistent with Article 81B of the Constitution. That has legal consequences. The first legal consequence is we anticipate a constitutional petition to question the composition of Parliament and then to seek to compel Parliament to quickly enact a law that would then provide mechanism for implementation of the two-thirds gender principle. This is not a new journey. Personally, I've been involved in this litigation in more than 3 cases. The petition that triggered the advisory by the Chief Justice to the President to dissolve Parliament was argued by myself and a lawyer called Relation Lawyer in petition number 371 of 2016. The Center for Rights, Education and Awareness, CRU, and Crown Trust, and of course FIDA and other human rights institutions that were there, including ICJ Kenya, questioned the failure by the National Assembly to pass that law. I think Charles Kanjama argued the advisory opinion number 2 of 2012 at the Supreme Court. Yeah? Yes. We used that advisory opinion where the Supreme Court said that law needs to be implemented within a period of 5 years. That period of 5 years was lapsing on 27th August 2015. Then Parliament, remember at that time Honorable Duale being the majority leader, invoked a provision in the Constitution in the 4th schedule that allowed them to extend the duration for enactment of that legislation by 1 year. So by 27th August 2016, there was no constitutional justification for the failure to create a legal framework for implementation of the two-thirds gender principle. Therefore, these human rights organizations approached the High Court. What Justice Mativo said in a judgment that was delivered on 29th of March 2017, the court gave the 12th Parliament 60 days to enact that law. They did not pass that law, and as a consequence, we went into an election without the two-thirds gender principle having been. That was the 11th Parliament, sorry. In the 12th Parliament, after the 2017 election, again, FIDA Kenya filed petition number 401 of 2017, and CRU and Crown Trust filed petition number 397, 2017, which again I argued. What we questioned in the court was that at the National Assembly, there was a deficit of 23 women to be able to rise to the level where the two-thirds gender threshold can be implemented. At the Senate, there's a deficit of 2 women, which we said this must be corrected by way of legislation. Honorable Duale said, we have had several interventions, legislative interventions, to try and implement this. You remember at one point, Honorable Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta spoke to it, and we thought with the nomination of Martha Karua as the first deputy president, woman president, the political capital necessary to implement this would be there. Okay. Where we are right now, we still intend to question the composition of Parliament, and we hope that this time the High Court would appreciate the challenges we've seen in the outgoing Parliament. Those 2 petitions to date, they have never been determined. They were filed on 16th of August 2017 until 5 years later, when Parliament now has, its term has lapsed, judgment is still pending. Okay. I think the High Court must take note of the tricks the National Assembly employs to slow down the momentum towards dispute resolution. Okay. But we will go to court.
Hopefully political goodwill will result in a result, because Kenya Kwanza has also committed to make sure that the threshold is attained.
If there is goodwill, there will be no need for litigation.
Yes.
And I urge Kenya Kwanza and Azimio to close ranks on this matter, because we have to amend Article 96 and 97 of the Constitution, replicate what is in Article 177, because the problem in Parliament is this. The numbers are fixed in law. 349. You have 290 constituencies, you have 47 county women reps, you have 12 nominated MPs. You cannot increase the number of women without amending those numbers in the Constitution.
Okay. All right. Really, Steve Ogola, governance expert Carol Mose, advocate Charles Kanjama, many thanks for the very interesting discussions, and I'm seeing a lot of reactions on Twitter as well on bringing on board your legal understanding of where we are and where the country needs to go and what we do expect.
And Carol, thank you for representing the people such as myself who are just trying to make sense of all of this.
Well, that's all we have for you. Many thanks. Have yourselves a wonderful Friday.